Chapter 39-31. The black-back stick ape, who was at the peak of the late stage of heaven rank, was actually unable to defeat a mere skybolt pig, and was even killed in an instant. What kind of strange situation was this? Even if this skybolt pig was at the perfect stage of heaven rank, it was not born to be a combat-type spirit beast, so what was the point of having a higher level? It couldn't be that a higher-level spirit beast could develop other powerful racial talents, right? If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they would have definitely thought that it was nonsense. But now that the truth was in front of them, they had no choice but to believe it. The black-back stick ape was indeed killed by the skybolt pig, and even its owner, Meng Tong, vomited blood and was seriously injured. This couldn't be faked. I've already said that underestimating the enemy is a big taboo. Now that he died with grievances, who can he blame? Lin Yi raised his eyelids indifferently, then looked at the judge and said, "Mr. Judge, why haven't you announced the verdict yet? Is there any doubt?" The judge then came back to his senses, cleared his throat and said in a deep voice, "The black-back stick ape is dead, so the winner of this duel is decided by the skybolt pig." Although they didn't understand how the skybolt pig killed the black-back stick ape, the result was there. The skybolt pig won. This was an indisputable fact. If anyone had any opinions about this, it could only be said that the person was not knowledgeable enough and had not seen the world. The world was big and there were all kinds of strange things. Who said that the skybolt pig couldn't kill the black-back stick ape? As long as the opportunity was right, there were even precedents of mortals killing cultivators. The battle between the spirit beasts came to an end under the dazed gazes of Meng Jueguang and the others. Without a doubt, Lin Yi had the last laugh. Meng Tong, who had been extremely complacent and arrogant before, had not only lost the black-backed rod ape, but he himself had also suffered a backlash from the death of his spiritual pet. His divine sense had been severely injured, and he would probably be bedridden for at least half a month. When everyone finally came back to their senses, they looked at the skybolt pig again. Their disdain had turned into fear and even fear. The previous 3 rounds of advancement were all luck, so it was reasonable for them to look down on skybolt pig. However, this last round was a true demonstration of his strength. Even the black-backed stick ape was easily defeated. This seemingly stupid and weak skybolt pig was just like his master Lin Yi. Both of them hid their strength well. Most of the newcomers were at the great perfection of the heaven realm, but they might not be the black-back ape's opponent. Since skybolt pig was able to kill the black-backed rod ape in a second, it meant that skybolt pig could also kill them in a second. Most importantly, they did not even understand what skybolt pig had done. Such terrifying strength was enough to make one shudder in fear. The 5th segment of the newcomer assessment, the spiritual beast assessment, had come to an end. Among all the newcomers in the Blue Cloud Pavilion, the one with the highest score was naturally Lin Yi. This was because he had once again obtained full marks in theory for this segment. The Sky Thunder Pig was a heaven-rank Great Circle. Therefore, the Spiritual Beast ranking point was 25 points. The Spiritual Beast strength point was 40 points for winning 4 rounds in a row, which added up to 65 points. When the first 5 segments were added together, Lin Yi's newcomer assessment points had reached a shocking 281 points, leaving all the other newcomers in the dust. After him was Qiao Hongsai's 181 points. She was in second place. Meng Tong, on the other hand, had 180 points, 1 point behind Qiao Hongkai in third place. As for fourth and fifth place, they were occupied by Xiao Ran and Li Jingming respectively. The title of Clear Cloud Pavilion's top 5 newcomers was not an undeserved reputation. At least among the Clear Cloud Pavilion's newcomers, there was no one who could shake their position. The gap between them and the other newcomers would only grow bigger and bigger, not smaller and smaller. Even Murong Zhen, an expert at the peak of the early stage of the Foundation establishment realm, could not make it into the top 5 even with her strength. Although she joined halfway and did not place much importance on points, this result was enough to explain the problem. Although there was still 1 segment left in the newcomer assessment, the situation was very clear now that things had developed to this point. Putting Murong Zhen aside, among all the newcomers in the Blue Cloud Pavilion, only these 5 people had the strength to stand out after entering the Blue Cloud Pavilion in the future. Among them, Lin Yi, as the well-deserved number 1 newcomer, would definitely receive the most attention. Although Meng Jueguang was already at the middle stage of the Foundation establishment realm, and was about to be promoted to the position of the 3rd Pavilion Master, he was like the sun in the sky in the eyes of the newcomers in the Blue Cloud Pavilion, but even he could not suppress Lin Yi's rise. Now, Lin Yi's name had even spread to the inner circle of the Blue Cloud Pavilion, attracting the attention of many of the higher-ups in the Blue Cloud Pavilion. A newcomer with limitless potential like him, for the weak blue cloud pavilion, was like a treasure that fell from the sky. After all, there was already Zhang Liju before them, and they couldn't help but let their imaginations run wild. Both of them came from the common world, both of them were outstanding in the welcoming pavilion, and there were even rumors that Lin Yi was a refiner just like Zhang Liju. The two of them were too similar, and it made people unconsciously think the same thing. Would Lin Yi become the next Zhang Liju? Back then, Zhang Liju alone was enough to make the weak blue cloud pavilion rise again. At its peak, it was not only on par with the other two pavilions, but it was even showing signs of becoming the leader of the three great pavilions. This situation only changed after Zhang Liju went to Nakajima, and without a successor, Blue Cloud Pavilion slowly fell back to its current state. If there was another legendary person like Zhang Liju, it would be a great thing for Blue Cloud Pavilion. Of course, Blue Cloud Pavilion wasn't completely united. Some people were happy, while others weren't so happy. When he heard from Ku Bai Shixiang that he had attracted the attention of the higher-ups in Blue Cloud Pavilion, Lin Yi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Even if Ku Bai Shixiang didn't say it directly, it wasn't hard for him to guess that there was a reason why he could attract the attention of the higher-ups. There had to be someone helping him in the dark. And this person didn't need to think too much. It had to be the previous third pavilion master, Lu Bianren, who had been pushed out of the welcoming pavilion. Lu Bianren's intentions were good. Right now, Lin Yi was being suppressed by Meng Jueguang and Su Lingchong. Their methods were getting more and more aggressive, and it was hard to say when they would take the risk. So, the only way to make Lin Yi's potential was to attract the attention of the higher-ups in advance. Only then would these people be a little afraid, and at least they wouldn't dare to use shameless methods like assassinations. Chapter 39-32. Now that the two heart-devouring exquisite grasses in the space of the jade pendant had matured and everything was ready, he could finally start refining the foundation-building pill again. Lin Yi had been looking forward to this day for a long time. Since he got the two heart-devouring exquisite grasses, more than 3 months had passed. Entering the space of the jade pendant and adjusting his state, Lin Yi checked the two heart-devouring exquisite grasses and the other alchemy materials he had prepared in advance. He was already familiar with this process. After a few hours, Lin Yi had the freshly refined foundation-building pill in his hands. The quality was the same as always, and there were 3 of them. Originally, the two heart-devouring exquisite grasses in Lin Yi's hands belonged to the congenital deficiency of cultivating in batches. No matter how good the quality of the other auxiliary materials was, it was already the limit to make 2 foundation-building pills. It was impossible to make 1 more. The reason why he could make 3 foundation-building pills was ultimately because of the heaven-defying effect of the space of the jade pendant. The unique environment completely made up for the damaged vitality caused by the congenital deficiency, which was why there was such a pleasant surprise. Looking at the 3 foundation-building pills in his hands, Lin Yi secretly clenched his fists. 3 months of hard work indeed did not go to waste. Without any hesitation, Lin Yi directly adjusted his state and began to take the foundation-building pill. According to his previous experience, 1 foundation-building pill was enough to reach the barrier. Then he could directly take the foundation-building barrier-breaking pill, which was enough to guarantee a successful breakthrough. Not only were 3 foundation-building pills sufficient, but he could also use 2 more in the future. However, to Lin Yi's surprise, this time after taking 2 foundation-building pills, he still could not reach the barrier. Lin Yi could not help but wonder if the foundation-building pill had lost its effect on him. It was not until he took the 3rd foundation-building pill that he finally reached the barrier between the peak of the early stage and the middle stage of the foundation-building pill. It was a solid barrier that was close to becoming solid. With regards to this result, Lin Yi was speechless and could only choose to silently accept it. No wonder when he was chatting with senior brother Ku Bai and Lu Bianren. It was said that the peak of the early stage of foundation establishment was a hurdle that all cultivators had to face. Many talented cultivators had been doing very well in the past. The halo of genius above their heads was dazzling, and they could even break through to the foundation-building realm effortlessly. However, there was a large group of people who were stuck at the peak of the early stage of the foundation-building realm. They hadn't made any progress for dozens of years, and their genius had been ground into mediocrity. It was no wonder that Meng Jueguang, the eldest senior brother, did not know Su Lingchong. He hadn't broken through this barrier after such a long time. This was not an isolated case, but a stage that all cultivators had to go through. Being stuck at the peak of the early stage of the foundation establishment realm for decades or even hundreds of years was a very common thing in the world of cultivation. In fact, If one did not have a large amount of cultivation resources or a special opportunity, many of them were still experts at the peak of the early foundation establishment stage until they died. There was a rumor in the streets that the peak of the foundation building realm was a threshold that couldn't be passed. Every time one passed a threshold, it was equivalent to a carp leaping through the dragon's gate. After one was reborn, one's strength would surely obtain explosive growth. From the peak of the early stage of the foundation establishment realm to the middle stage of the foundation establishment realm, most people needed decades or even hundreds of years to be able to cross this threshold. It was no wonder that Lin Yi had consumed 3 supreme-grade foundation building pills to barely touch the barrier. And this even included the results of Lin Yi's hard work in the past few months. However, although the supreme-grade foundation building pills were very precious, they were able to make up for the years of bitter cultivation of others who didn't consume pills. This was definitely worth it. One must know that the process of consuming 3 supreme-grade foundation building pills consecutively was a process that even with Lin Yi's mental fortitude, it was as if he was gambling on a card table. Fortunately, the final result was still satisfactory and didn't disappoint. After consuming the supreme-grade foundation building barrier-breaking pill, Lin Yi's next step was to break through to the middle stage of the foundation establishment realm in one go. While Lin Yi was concentrating on his breakthrough in seclusion, his opponents were not idle. Among them, the one who made the biggest move was Meng Tong. This was because Meng Jueguang had finally decided to let him take the meridian heart-shattering pill that he had prepared beforehand. Because the black-backed rod ape had been killed in seconds, Meng Tong was currently suffering from the backlash of his divine sense. It was not suitable for him to take such a domineering pill like the meridian heart-shattering pill. Meng Jueguang was also well aware of this, but he had no other choice. He was running out of time. The last round of the assessment was set to take place in 10 days. According to the rules announced in advance, this was the decisive round that could truly determine the outcome. For all the newcomers who participated in the assessment, success or failure would depend on this move. With Meng Tong's current strength in the early stage of the foundation establishment realm, it was obvious that he was no match for Lin Yi. Even Murong Zhen, who was at the peak of the early stage of the foundation establishment realm, would not be able to do anything to Lin Yi. As mentioned before, with Liu Bianren's secret operation, the few higher-ups of the Blue Cloud Pavilion had now begun to pay attention to Lin Yi's brilliance. Although Meng Jueguang was proud of his success, he was already feeling a lot of pressure. If he did not think of a way to suppress Lin Yi as soon as possible, not only would it be difficult to explain to Su Lingqiong, but it would also be extremely difficult for Meng Jueguang to suppress Lin Yi in the future. As the 3rd pavilion master, he could not suppress a newcomer? That was not all. What he was most afraid of was that when he became the 3rd pavilion master, Lin Yi would become the senior brother in charge. No matter who he forced to become the senior brother, it would have nothing to do with him as the 3rd pavilion master. If his 2 subordinates did not listen to him, he would be even more miserable than Liu Bianren. Therefore, in Meng Jueguang's opinion, the final round of the assessment was his last chance. Under the pressure, he could only place all his bets on Meng Tong. In fact, if he was not forced to do so, Meng Jueguang did not plan to do so. After all, it would be too cruel to the ignorant Meng Tong. Moreover, after so many things he had already seen through Meng Tong, this guy was unable to accomplish anything and was good at spoiling things. He was not someone who could be entrusted with important matters. In comparison, the other 2 subordinates he had, Murong Zhen and Li Jingming, were much more reliable than Meng Tong. Unfortunately, even though Murong Zhen was willing to sleep with him, she did not have the right position. She was only willing to be his ally, not his subordinate. Meng Jueguang was using her, but at the same time he had to keep his guard up. He could not completely trust her. Chapter 39-33. Up until now, Meng Jueguang still hadn't discovered that Li Jingming had already succeeded in breaking through to the foundation establishment stage. It could be seen how good Li Jingming was at hiding his strength. His ability to hide his strength was almost on par with his big brother Lin Yi. Therefore, even if he knew that it was unreliable, Meng Jueguang could only bite the bullet and put all his chips on Meng Tong. As long as this guy could be reliable at the critical moment, the ancestors of the Meng family would burn incense. There were only 10 days left until the final assessment. Meng Jueguang couldn't wait for Meng Tong to fully recover, so he could only bite the bullet and trick Meng Tong. This was very risky, but he had no other choice. Looking at the blood-red pill in Meng Jueguang's hand, Meng Tong couldn't help but drool. Ever since he knew about the meridian heart-shattering pill, he had been waiting for this day for too long. Unfortunately, Meng Jueguang had always asked him to hold it in. Today he could finally get what he wanted. However, Meng Jueguang didn't give it to him so easily. Instead he asked, "Meng Tong, how have I treated you during this time?" Meng Tong was stunned, and then he hurriedly flattered, "Very good. Ninth cousin, you have treated me with great kindness. If you have any orders, I will not hesitate to sacrifice my life." That's good. No matter what happens in the future, you just have to remember one thing. We are both grasshoppers on the same line. No matter what I do, I will do it for you. I will never cheat or harm you. You must keep this in mind, understand? Meng Jueguang said with deep meaning. Of course, how can I not know how Ninth Cousin Tong treats me? Ninth Cousin Tong, you can rest assured that I, Meng Tong, am not that kind of ungrateful guy. Meng Tong didn't understand, so he continued to pat his chest and promised. He thought that Meng Jueguang was afraid that he would turn his back on him after taking the Meridian Heart-Shattering Pill and become stronger. Meng Jueguang nodded in satisfaction before handing the Meridian Heart-Shattering Pill to Meng Tong. He paused and said, "You've heard about the effects of this pill from young Master Su. With your current strength in the early stage of the Foundation Establishment realm, advancing to the peak of the early stage of the Foundation Establishment realm is a sure thing. There is no doubt about this. However, everything has its pros and cons. As the saying goes, medicine is 30% poisonous. You should know what a powerful medicinal effect represents." I know what to do. Meng Tong nodded repeatedly. In fact, he didn't even know a fart. He didn't understand the deeper meaning of Meng Jueguang's words at all. He just wanted to take the Meridian Heart-Shattering Pill as soon as possible to improve his strength. If that's the case, then I won't say anything more. There's no time to lose. You should take this Meridian Heart-Shattering Pill as soon as possible after you adjust it a little. Meng Jueguang narrowed his eyes. Meng Jueguang deliberately didn't point it out. After all, no matter how stupid Meng Tong was, if he knew the side effects of the Meridian Heart-Shattering Pill, he probably wouldn't dare to take it again. He probably wouldn't dare to use it again. This was something that could ruin his entire life. Which normal person would dare to use his entire life as a bargaining chip? Anyway, Meng Jueguang had already said so much in advance, and he had done his duty. As for Meng Tong's failure to understand the deeper meaning of these words, he could only blame his own stupidity, not Meng Jueguang's head. Yes. Take care, Ninth Cousin. Meng Tong couldn't wait to start. Although Meng Jueguang had told him several times in recent months, he didn't take it seriously. The Meridian Heart-Shattering Pill's effect was overbearing, and he had to be fully prepared before taking it. However, he didn't take it to heart. Anyway, as long as he could directly advance one level, everything else was fleeting. Meng Jueguang nodded. When he walked to the door, he suddenly stopped and turned back. Meng Tong, when you take the Meridian Heart-Shattering Pill later, the process will be very painful. If you can't endure it, you'll be finished. This is not an alarmist talk. It was rare to see Meng Jueguang so serious. Although Meng Tong was impatient, he still heard something between the lines. He asked cautiously, "What should I do?" No matter how arrogant he was, Meng Tong could at least clearly recognize that willpower was never his strong point. If what Meng Jueguang said was true, he might not be able to bear it. If you really can't endure it, you only need to remember that hatred can make people endure all kinds of pain and suffering. You only need to know who is the enemy you want to kill the most and put all the pain on him. You must survive and return it to him 100 times or 1,000 times in the future. That's enough. Meng Jueguang left these words and turned to leave. Hatred? Meng Tong listened thoughtfully, and then a trace of ferocity flashed in his eyes. Who is the enemy I want to kill the most? Of course it's that bastard Lin Yi. Speaking of enemies, Meng Tong had always been arrogant, so he had many enemies. When he was in his hometown, he was a local tyrant and had many conflicts with people. However, ever since he came to the Welcome Pavilion, he had been completely separated from the outside world. Under Meng Jueguang's care, most newcomers would only dare to be angry with him, but not dare to say anything. Even if Li Jingming was oppressed by him in every possible way, he would never make a sound. There was only one enemy left, and that was naturally Lin Yi. After all, wasn't the fundamental purpose of taking the Meridian Heart-Shattering Pill to defeat Lin Yi, the pretentious leader? Wait for your death, Lin Yi. Meng Tong spat fiercely and stared greedily at the Meridian Heart-Shattering Pill in his hand. After a while, he suddenly stuffed it into his mouth. There were only 10 days left until the last round of assessment. How long would it take for the Meridian Heart-Shattering Pill to take effect? How long would it take for him to stabilize his strength and realm? These were all unknown. Although Meng Tong's actions were somewhat hasty, it was also the situation that Meng Jueguang hoped to see. However, what Meng Tong did not expect was that the moment the meridian heart-shattering pill entered his stomach, the pain that Meng Jueguang mentioned suddenly came without warning. It was the legendary heart-shattering pain. Ah! A heart-wrenching scream instantly resounded in the mountains. Almost all the newcomers in the Blue Cloud Pavilion were startled out of their caves and looked at each other. Before they could figure out what was going on, another scream was heard. This time, everyone understood that the scream came from Meng Tong's fourth cave at the foot of the mountain. What's going on? Even killing a pig doesn't make such a loud noise, right? The newcomers could not help but have strange expressions. Although the density of the spiritual energy in the caves at the foot of the mountain was not high, it was built by the three pavilions after all. The facilities were absolutely first class, and because of the cave's restrictions, the soundproofing was excellent. Chapter 39-34. This was the first time in history that Meng Tong's cave dwelling had such a penetrating howl. It was no wonder that everyone was so surprised. What kind of pain did he have to suffer for him to howl in such an earth-shattering manner? What the hell is Meng Tong doing? Could it be that Meng Jueguang is torturing him inside? He's screaming so miserably, this is too abnormal. Xiao Hongkai ridiculed, taking pleasure in other people's misfortune. Xiao Ran speculated with a face full of doubt, could it be that he's practicing some strange evil martial arts? From what I know, only a few external martial arts techniques would suffer such devastation. But Meng Tong isn't an external martial arts expert, right? Lin Yi smiled faintly and said thoughtfully, he probably ate something that he can't digest. It doesn't matter if he wants to scream, then let him scream. Lin Yi could more or less guess what Meng Tong was doing now. After all, he had Li Jingming as a spy. Moreover, during the month he was at the back mountain outskirts, he had already heard about the existence of the meridian heart-shattering pill from Shanghai Laner, so it wasn't hard to connect the dots. If it was someone else, they would more or less be a little anxious at this time. The more evil a power was, the more likely it was to become stronger in a short period of time. This kind of thing was not uncommon in the cultivation world, but unfortunately, Lin Yi didn't care about it at all. It didn't matter if Meng Tong became stronger or crippled, Lin Yi didn't care. He only cared about one thing at the moment, and that was to stabilize his foundation establishment mid-stage as soon as possible. He needed to fully grasp his newfound strength. Other than that, everything else didn't matter. 10 days later, all the newcomers gathered in the Welcome Pavilion to prepare for the last round of the newcomer assessment. It was also the most important round that determined their future. Usually in these kinds of occasions, Meng Tong, who had always been arrogant, would often appear early and let a large group of Blue Cloud Pavilion newcomers surround him. They would talk loudly as if they were afraid that they wouldn't be the focus of the audience. But this time, as soon as Meng Tong appeared, he didn't need to say anything at all. Naturally, he had already attracted the attention of everyone present. Damn. What's wrong with this guy? Why is his hair all dyed white? Xiao Hongkai looked at Meng Tong blankly. He couldn't help but rub his eyes. This hair doesn't seem to be dyed. It should be natural white. It can't be the legendary white hair overnight, right? Xiao Ran also had a face of disbelief. Lin Yi shook his head slightly and said, the hair is not the main point. Didn't you guys notice that his entire temperament has changed? Only then did Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongkai realize what Lin Yi was talking about. Even the bitter senior was surprised. Junior Lin's right, Meng Tong used to give people the impression that he was a complete idiot, without any strength or depth. But now that I look at him, his entire person is different. He is so strange and twisted like a wounded beast. If you provoke him a little, he will immediately come back for revenge. Lin Yi's expression was indifferent. But in his heart he thought, what kind of strange pill is this meridian heart-shattering pill? In just a short 10 days, it actually made Meng Tong completely change into a different person. If it was just a simple rebirth of strength, it would be fine. After all, the foundation-building pill could have the same effect. But this meridian heart-shattering pill, it actually made a person's temperament change. It was simply incredible. In the past 10 days, the fourth immortal's cave at the foot of the mountain continuously emitted horrifying howls. Meng Tong was almost suffering inhuman torture at every moment, especially during the period between midnight and noon. The miserable howls were so heart-wrenching that it made one's scalp go numb. It was no wonder that in just a short 10 days, his entire person would be twisted into such a strange and evil person. Under the shocked gazes of everyone, Meng Tong slowly walked in front of Lin Yi. His eyes were full of ferocious blood vessels. He laughed coldly and said, I've waited for this day. Lin Yi, everything I have now is thanks to you. Are you ready to die? After saying that, Meng Tong did not care about Lin Yi's reaction. He turned around and walked to the side. It seemed that in his eyes, Lin Yi was already a dead man. There was no need to pay attention to him anymore. Interesting. Lin Yi smiled playfully. Before this, Meng Tong had always called him pretentious leader and never called him by his full name. Although this was only a very subtle difference in the eyes of a person like Lin Yi, it was enough to explain the problem. Meng Tong had never called Lin Yi by his full name before. In the end, it was a kind of psychological distortion. At least it showed that he could not face Lin Yi's existence. He could only use these mocking and insulting words to get his psychological balance. At that time, no matter how strong Meng Tong was or how much confidence he had, he was actually just a wolf in sheep's clothing. But now, judging from his tone, Meng Tong was not as arrogant as before. However, it was the first time that Lin Yi felt threatened by him. If he was not careful, it could be a fatal threat. Junior brother Lin, there must be something wrong when something is out of the ordinary. Even if you are facing a defeated opponent like Meng Tong, you must not let your guard down. Senior brother Ku reminded him. He did not know about the Meridian heart-shattering pill, but he could see that Meng Tong's strength had skyrocketed. It was no longer the same as before. Senior brother Ku, don't worry. I know what I'm doing. Lin Yi nodded. A moment later, the pavilion master of the Welcome Pavilion, Hu Yunfeng, went on stage and announced to all the newcomers, in the pugilistic world, it is inevitable to bump into each other. Everyone has an enemy, and there will definitely be friction between you newcomers. According to the rules of the cultivation world, strength is always the most important. Our Welcome Pavilion is naturally no exception. So today's last round of the newcomer assessment is specially prepared for all of you to adjust to your conflicts. The newcomers started discussing when they heard this. Even if the newcomer assessment was ignored, the Welcome Pavilion was usually free to arrange battles as long as there was a witness present and they reported it to their respective senior brothers. There was no need to specially set up a so-called newcomer assessment for this, right? Obviously, the battle round that Hu Yunfeng mentioned was not as simple as everyone thought it was. This was a round that could have a decisive effect on the entire assessment series. The success or failure of this round would directly determine whether all the previous efforts would be in vain, or if they could catch up and successfully counterattack. Chapter 39-35. The moment Hu Yunfeng said that, there was an uproar as everyone looked at each other. The winner could snatch all the points of the loser. This rule was more than cruel. The person who came up with this rule was simply a devil. To the rookies these days, points were their lifeline. It directly determined their future. Snatching their points was no different from snatching their lives. They would definitely fight to the death with you. However, this cruel rule made the eyes of some rookies light up. This was the best opportunity to make a comeback. At least this rule suited Meng Tong's taste. It just so happened that he had consumed the Meridian heart-shattering pill. His strength had increased greatly, so he had the confidence to fight against Lin Yi. As Meng Tong was secretly calculating, Hu Yunfeng's following words made his eyelids twitch. Of course, it's not that you have to fight in this round. If any rookie is challenged, they can choose to refuse. However, the price is to hand over 50 points to the opponent. It's fair and reasonable. 50 points was an astronomical figure to other rookies. However, for a freak like Lin Yi who could easily obtain full points, it was a drop in the bucket. Not to mention 50 points, even 100 points was nothing to him. However, this way for Meng Tong, who was bent on stepping on Lin Yi's corpse to advance, it was not good news. What if Lin Yi sensed that something was amiss and took the initiative to admit defeat? Although Lin Yi had always been posturing at his level of strength, his intuition towards danger was definitely very sharp. It was unlikely that he would continue to throw his life away despite knowing that he would die. Even if Meng Tong's personality had changed drastically, he was still as arrogant and confident as ever. I hope this fellow can continue posturing. Otherwise, how can I live up to the heart-shattering pain I've endured all these days? Meng Tong looked coldly at Lin Yi. Moments later, the rules were all explained. The rookies of the three pavilions began their battles. And before everyone began their final battle, the first thing to do was to draw lots. This segment was too crucial and fatal for the rookies, so it was necessary to ensure fairness. Drawing lots was to let the rookies decide the order of the challenges. After all, according to the rules, every rookie only had one chance to challenge and one chance to be challenged. If they did not use such a method to determine the order, it would be easy for many people to rush to challenge the same person. Everyone knew that one had to pick on the weakest persimmon. The purpose of drawing lots was to solve this problem. Whoever drew a bigger number would have the right to issue a challenge first. This time, the first person to issue a challenge to Blue Cloud Pavilion turned out to be Meng Tong. He did not know if Meng Jueguang had purposely gone easy on him. Seeing the white-haired Meng Tong slowly walk up the stage with an unfamiliar and powerful aura, the rookies could not help but shrink their necks. Previously, Meng Tong was no longer a weakling. Now, he was so inexplicably powerful that it made people shudder. If anyone were to be called out by him, their legs would really tremble and they would have a heart attack. Fortunately, Meng Tong had already determined his target. He pointed at Lin Yi, who was below the stage, and hooked his finger. "You know who I'm talking about. Come on up if you're not afraid of death." Lin Yi smiled nonchalantly and didn't say anything else as he walked up the stage with a relaxed expression on his face. "Not admitting defeat? Now kneel before me. You can still keep your worthless life." Meng Tong looked at him and raised his eyebrows. At the same time, he unreservedly revealed his aura. The crowd below the stage turned pale with fright. Even Murong Zhen, an expert at the peak of the early stage of the Foundation Establishment realm, could not help but change her expression. She could tell from Meng Tong's aura that Meng Tong's strength had completely surpassed hers. He should be between the peak of the early stage of the Foundation Establishment realm and the middle stage of the Foundation Establishment realm. It was even possible that he had the strength of the strongest person below the middle stage of the Foundation Establishment realm. Admit defeat? Lin Yi shrugged and smiled faintly. "Why would I admit defeat? You can't be thinking that you can defeat me with that little strength of yours, right? Pretentious. Since you don't want to admit defeat, that's for the best. I'll finish you off today and end all troubles." Meng Tong scoffed. Although the strength that Lin Yi had displayed was frighteningly powerful, with Meng Tong's current confidence, he did not care about his opponent at all. "Then let's fight and see." Lin Yi shook his head calmly. Meng Tong did not waste any more words. Suddenly, a terrifying force exploded from beneath his feet. He stomped on the rock ring and shot towards his opponent like an arrow. Below the arena, Meng Jueguang was extremely gratified when he saw this, whereas senior brother Ku Bai, Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongkai frowned in their hearts. Exactly what sort of strange fortuitous encounter did this fellow Meng Tong obtain? His strength was actually able to rise explosively to such an extent in a short period of time. At that very moment, Meng Tong's powerful aura was too much for the audience to handle. Some of the weaker newcomers unknowingly took a few steps back, not daring to look at him directly. However, Lin Yi did not care at all. Facing Meng Tong, who was charging at him, he casually extended his palm and gently swatted him as if he was swatting a fly. Then Meng Tong was slapped to the ground and could not get up for a long time. Everyone was dumbfounded. The powerful Meng Tong was slapped to the ground just like that? This scene was unexpected. In the past few months in the Welcome Pavilion, Lin Yi's strength had been deeply rooted in everyone's hearts. No one would foolishly look down on him anymore. But at the same time, they had witnessed Meng Tong's experience over the past few days and his current condition. Today Meng Tong could be said to have been reborn. Even when Murong Zhen faced him, he couldn't help but shudder. How could such a person be a weakling? To everyone, even if Meng Tong's strength wasn't above Lin Yi's, it was definitely on par with him. It was impossible for him to be much weaker. They did not expect that the first fight would be like this. Indeed, Meng Tong had displayed unprecedented strength, and people couldn't help but be afraid of him. They even began to imagine that Lin Yi was finally going to die this time. However, all of this was nothing in front of Lin Yi. The powerful Meng Tong in their eyes was like a fly. He was easily slapped to the ground. This scene shocked everyone. They were speechless for a long time. Finally, Meng Tong slowly crawled up from the ground. He spat a mouthful of bloody saliva at Lin Yi's feet and cursed. Then he swept his leg at Lin Yi. Chapter 39-36. Everyone was dumbfounded. The first time could be attributed to luck or Meng Tong's underestimation of his opponent. But the second time, what was this? Why? Meng Tong was stunned by the slap himself. He shook his head in disbelief and climbed up from the ground again. His bloodshot eyes were now bloodshot. The side effect of the Meridian heart-shattering pill was not only to make people suffer from the pain of having their hearts broken at noon and midnight, but those with weak willpower would also be tortured to the point of losing their minds and even become a complete lunatic. Meng Tong had never been a person with strong willpower. Otherwise, he wouldn't have undergone such a drastic change in temperament in just 10 days and become such a strange person. His eyes were bloodshot. It was a sign that he had completely lost his mind and was about to go berserk. Seeing that Meng Tong was once again charging at him aggressively, Lin Yi smiled and shook his head. He curled his lips and said, Don't eat unclean things. You've really set a good example for everyone. Then, without waiting for his opponent to attack, he raised his hand and slapped Meng Tong to the ground. Watching this scene, the audience was silent. They had been shocked to the point of numbness. At this moment, there was only one sound left: Meng Tong's heavy breathing. Die, for me. Meng Tong was like a beast. His limbs were on the ground and he was panting heavily. He gritted his teeth and said word by word. Along with his voice, the hard stone slabs under his feet cracked. It felt as if they couldn't support Meng Tong's weight at all. The crazy and monstrous aura that gathered on his body made everyone's eyelids twitch. Did this guy really lose his mind and go berserk? However, Lin Yi turned a blind eye to this. He was still as calm as the clouds and the wind, looking at Meng Tong indifferently, watching this fellow's every move. From the first day he arrived at Heaven Stage Island, he had never regarded Meng Tong as his opponent. He wasn't before, and he still wasn't even after Meng Tong took the Meridian heart-shattering pill. Although Meng Tong was gradually losing his mind, he could still detect a trace of deeply hidden contempt from Lin Yi's indifferent expression. Perhaps this was not intentional on Lin Yi's part, but a natural contempt of the strong towards the weak. The greatest contempt was not all kinds of contempt and mockery, but just plain disregard. Ah! Meng Tong suddenly laughed hysterically. He stared at Lin Yi with a ferocious face and shouted, "How dare you look down on me? How dare you look down on me? Do you know how to write the word death, pretentious old man? Of course I went to school properly. Don't you know that? Do you need me to teach you? But the price may be a little high." Lin Yi teased, not putting the other party in his eyes at all. "You're courting death." Meng Tong suddenly exploded with anger. He exerted force with his 1,000 legs, and the broken stone slabs under his feet instantly exploded, splashing onto the ground. The people below the stage were in a mess and they couldn't dodge in time. Haha, so fierce, but unfortunately. Lin Yi's eyes narrowed, and his whole body suddenly condensed a blazing fist intent that was close to materialization. He blasted out the 24 styles of frenzied fist, accompanied by an indifferent smile. "It's far from enough to deal with me." Boom. There was a loud bang, and in the sky full of dust, a figure was sent flying like a cannonball, and fell to the ground several tens of feet away. It was unknown whether the figure was dead or alive. It was Meng Tong, who was beaten beyond recognition. When the dust slowly settled, everyone, including Meng Jueguang, could not help but gasp when they saw the scene in front of them. The Clear Cloud Pavilion's new disciple battle stage, which had experienced countless battles, had been perfected to this day, but at this moment, it was destroyed beyond recognition. Just one move of the 24 styles of the Mad Flame Fist had turned half of the battle stage into rubble. The only place that was left intact was the area under Lin Yi's feet. Everyone was really shocked by this scene. The power of one punch was so great. One had to know that the stage was protected by a special protective array, and its defense was much stronger than other places. It was extremely difficult for a normal newcomer to leave a mark on the stage, not to mention destroying it. This was the first time that a newcomer had destroyed the stage. Today's scene could already be recorded in the history of Welcome Pavilion. Challenge me? You're just taking a crooked path. Where does your confidence come from? Lin Yi did not look at the reckless Meng Tong, but coldly glanced at Meng Jueguang, who was below the stage. Under his gaze, Meng Jueguang, the senior disciple in charge, was actually oppressed by a mere newcomer to the point that his scalp went numb, and he did not dare to look him in the eye. Today, Meng Jueguang was already a mid-stage foundation establishment expert, but the pressure that Lin Yi brought him at this moment made him have the urge to break into a run. Just thinking about it made people feel incredulous. Could it be that this guy is already a mid-stage foundation establishment expert? If that's the case, then it makes sense that Meng Tong is not his opponent. But how is this possible? Looking at Lin Yi walking down the stage so casually, Meng Jueguang was shocked by this thought that popped up in his mind. No matter how he thought about it, Lin Yi was just a newcomer reaching the mid-stage of foundation establishment. This was too exaggerated. One had to know that even the legendary miracle Dr. Zhang Liju didn't reach such a frightening level back in the day. Not to mention the newcomers in the Clear Cloud Pavilion. Even looking at all the newcomers in the Welcoming Pavilion, there were only two who could reach the peak of the early stage of foundation establishment. One was Murong Zhen, who joined midway, and the other was Meng Tong, who was beaten to a pulp by Lin Yi. Murong Zhen, needless to say, was already at the peak of the early stage of foundation establishment before he came to the three great pavilions. As for Meng Tong, if there wasn't a monster like Lin Yi to compare, he could be considered a legendary newcomer in Welcome Pavilion. After all, in just a few short months he went from sky full cycle all the way to the peak of the early stage of Foundation establishment. If he didn't use the Meridian heart-shattering pill, this speed was already frightening enough. 99% of the newcomers couldn't even catch up. Unfortunately, his opponent was Lin Yi. As the saying goes, if there was a Yu, why would there be a Liang? Plus, Meng Tong didn't seem to be at Zhou Yu's level. Even Meng Tong and Murong Zhen, two early-stage Foundation establishment masters, were overshadowed in front of Lin Yi. As for the other newcomers, naturally they were like floating clouds. All of a sudden, everyone looked at Lin Yi with deep respect in their eyes. Chapter 39-37. Not to mention the others, even Meng Jueguang himself felt a little guilty when facing Lin Yi, let alone these newcomers who were merely at the heaven stage great perfection. Murong Zhen looked at Lin Yi with a hint of splendor in his eyes, but there was also a hint of deep jealousy. Why did you go against Lin Yi and Lin Yi still protected you? And this beauty took the initiative to throw herself into his arms, and Lin Yi was still not interested? Shengguan Laner, just you wait, I will definitely make Lin Yi kneel before me. I will join hands with him and make you wish you were dead. Junior brother Lin, this time, you have completely locked in the first place. Congratulations, senior brother Ku Bai said sincerely for Lin Yi. According to the rules, the winner would get all of the losers' points. Lin Yi had 280 points to begin with, and with Meng Tong's 180, he had a total of 461 points. It was a shocking result. Not to mention the other newcomers in Blue Cloud Pavilion, even if all of their points were added together, they might not be as many as Lin Yi. They were not on the same level at all. Points are secondary, but I was a little careless this time. I made a mistake, Lin Yi said regretfully as he looked at Meng Tong from afar. According to his original plan, he was going to directly kill Meng Tong this time to avoid any future troubles. After all, the current Meng Tong was a completely different person from the original Meng Tong. He could ignore the previous idiot Meng Tong, but now he had to be on guard against this one. In Lin Yi's expectations, the 24 forms of Frenzy Fist was already enough to instantly kill a peak early-stage Foundation establishment expert. However, Meng Tong had eaten the Meridian heart-shattering pill, so he was somewhat different from a peak early-stage Foundation establishment expert who advanced normally. It was hard to say whether he could kill him this time. Unfortunately, the battle was already over, and it was too late for Lin Yi to add another blow. If he had known earlier, he would have spared no effort and directly used the 23rd style of the Frenzy 8 trigrams palm. In my opinion. Junior brother Lin, you don't have to be disappointed. He's in such a miserable state. Whether or not Meng Tong can come back to life is still unknown. It's up to the will of the heavens. The bitter senior brother consoled. Yes, that's all we can do for now. Lin Yi nodded. In any case, his strength was enough to suppress his opponent. Even Meng Jueguang couldn't possibly be his opponent. Even if Meng Tong was a little strange, there was no need to be too afraid. At this moment, everyone else was still shocked by the battle between Lin Yi and Meng Tong. They were so shocked that they couldn't recover for a long time. From the first day, there had been constant friction between Lin Yi and Meng Tong. The scene of Lin Yi defeating Meng Tong in one move was still fresh in the minds of the newcomers. After that, Meng Tong had been scheming to get back at him, but he could only watch the gap between them grow bigger and bigger. It even evolved to the point that even a subordinate of Lin Yi like Xiao Hongkai could directly suppress him. Now that he had finally consumed the heart-shattering pill, he thought that he could make a comeback. However, he never expected that he would end up in such an awkward situation. Even though it was unknown if Meng Tong was dead or alive, the rookies could not help but feel their hearts break for him. After this battle, as the arena had been destroyed by Lin Yi, the Blue Cloud Pavilion rookies could only move elsewhere. They found an empty space and continued the final battle between the rookies, with the battle between Lin Yi and Meng Tong before them. The other battles between the Blue Cloud Pavilion rookies clearly didn't have such a scalp-tingling feeling. Although it could be said that they were betting their lives, everyone fought with all their might. There were many battles to the death that resulted in both sides being heavily injured. The scene could be said to be intense, but due to the limitations of their strength, that was all they could do. What was worth mentioning was that Lin Yi had appeared once again and challenged Murong Zhen. Previously, it was Meng Tong who had taken the initiative to challenge him. As for Lin Yi, he still had one more chance to challenge someone else. Lin Yi did this not only for his own group, but also for Shanghai Laner. If Murong Zhen chose to accept the challenge, Lin Yi could take the opportunity to eliminate her completely. After experiencing the incident at Half Moon Lake, his impression of Murong Zhen was extremely bad. If he really had the opportunity, he would not show mercy to the fairer sex. Beating her to death was the way to go. Unfortunately, Morongzhen chose to admit defeat very sensibly. 50 points were not important to her. Furthermore, Lin Yi's strength was already deeply rooted in everyone's hearts. For a woman like her who was good at forbearance, there was no way she would give Lin Yi the opportunity to take advantage of her. After that, Morongzhen followed up with an eye for an eye. She challenged Xiao Ran by name. Even though she was not Lin Yi's opponent right now, she could still get back at him by defeating his lackey. Lin Yi could do nothing about this. It was true that he was powerful, but he could not replace Xiao Ran. Moreover, Xiao Ran was clearly not Morongzhen's opponent at the early stage of the foundational realm. Without a choice, Xiao Ran could only follow Morongzhen's example. He chose to hand over 50 points and admit defeat. The all-important final round of the newcomer assessment had finally come to an end. The final result was obvious. Lin Yi won first place without any suspense, Xiao Hongkai was second, and Li Jingming was third. According to the news announced by the pavilion leader, Hu Yunfeng, the points of this newcomer assessment were not only related to the treatment and status one would receive after entering the 3 pavilions in the future, but the winner would also receive a great reward. The top 3 from each of the 3 pavilions would receive a medicinal pill as a reward. They could choose between the foundation building pill and the foundation barrier breaking pill. Lin Yi and the other 2 were already experts at the early stage of the foundational realm. Without a doubt, they all chose the foundation barrier-breaking pill. As soon as the medicinal pill was handed to him, Lin Yi immediately gave it to Xiao Ran. After all, Lin Yi had just broken through to the middle stage of the foundational realm with 3 foundation-building pills and a foundation barrier-breaking pill. He would not need this medicinal pill for the time being. Even if he did need it, he could refine it himself. This foundation barrier-breaking pill was even more important to Xiao Ran. With his strength and talent and cultivation, he might be able to surprise Lin Yi someday and become an expert at the peak of the early stage of the foundational realm. After several months and 6 rounds, the highly anticipated newcomer assessment finally came to an end. The final result could be said to be some happy and some sad. Looking at the Blue Cloud Pavilion's newcomers, Lin Yi's group was undoubtedly the biggest winner who had the last laugh. After the newcomer assessment, the newcomer pavilion's newcomers could finally relax. They could finally relax after such a long time. Those who needed to rest rested and those who needed to cultivate cultivated. Everyone had their own plans. Chapter 39-38. During this time, there was a piece of news that caught Lin Yi's attention. It came from Li Jingming and it was about Meng Tong. After the newcomer assessment ended, Meng Jueguang searched for many healing medicines, wanting to save Meng Tong. However, none of them were effective. Some of the medicines even had the opposite effect, almost causing Meng Tong to die on the spot. However, just as Meng Jueguang was helpless and could only watch Meng Tong die, Meng Tong, after suffering in endless pain for a few days, relied on his own will to survive, and turned back from the edge of death. Now, Meng Tong's injuries had gradually stabilized. Although it was not possible to recover in a short period of time, it was only a matter of time. He really is an unkillable cockroach. After reading the report, Lin Yi could not help but frown. He had a bad feeling. After this incident, Meng Tong, who was originally a small character, seemed to gradually grow into a big threat. It was like opening Pandora's box. The Meridian Heartbreaker pill seemed to have created another Meng Tong, a more troublesome Meng Tong. In time, this guy might grow into a big character and it would be difficult to deal with him. However, since things had come to this, Lin Yi did not have any good ideas to kill this threat in the bud. He had the strength, but he did not have the opportunity to make a move. This made Lin Yi experience the helplessness of Meng Jueguang and the others. He could not order Li Jingming to secretly assassinate Meng Tong. Regardless of whether Li Jingming was willing or not, even if he really wanted to do it, it would be difficult to do it under the eyes of Meng Jueguang. If he showed any flaws, he would be finished. Other than this report, after cultivating for a few days, when his realm was almost stable, Lin Yi finally decided to go to the market. During the month he was in the back mountain, he collected a lot of treasures. Along the way he also killed some high-level spirit beasts that wanted to kill him. The corpses of spirit beasts were different from treasures like spirit medicines. Many things needed to be processed by professionals before they could be useful. Therefore it was useless for Lin Yi to keep them on him. It was better to trade them in the market. Now Lin Yi needed to start preparing for his next breakthrough. However, after wandering around the back mountain for a month, he still could not find the heart-devouring exquisite grass. This result made Lin Yi feel depressed, but it also made him realize that it wasn't practical for him to search for something as rare as the heart-devourer grass on his own. After all, there was a limit to how much he could search for it on his own. It wasn't an easy task to search for it in the vast back mountains by himself. Hence, he was prepared to make another trip to the Hong Chamber of Commerce this time. If Hong Zhong was willing to help him purchase it with his connections and influence as a big shot in the Chamber of Commerce, even if he wasn't 100% confident, it was still better than Lin Yi doing it himself. Other than that, for the past 2 months the Southern Sky Gate and Wuxia had stopped pursuing Second Lin for some reason. Therefore there was not much risk for Lin Yi to go to the market this time. After making up his mind, Second Lin, who had been silent for a long time, returned to the streets outside the market. His goal was clear. He was going to find Qin Heihu, who specialized in the spirit beast business. Although Lin Yi had only met Qin Heihu once, he had a good impression of him. This wasn't to say that Qin Heihu was a good person. In fact, no one who could make it big in a place like the market was a good person. It was just that this Qin Heihu was a smart person who knew when to advance and when to retreat, and he was generous as well. Working with someone like this was more to Lin Yi's taste. Yo Lin brothers, long time no see. Although they had only met once, Qin Heihu still recognized Lin Yi at first glance. He greeted him with a smile. Lin Yi was slightly taken aback, then he responded with a smile, "Brother Qin Heihu, how have you been?" Qin Heihu looked at the bag behind Lin Yi and immediately nodded in understanding. "Lin brothers, you have to take care of my business again. Every time I see you there are good things. You are a rare distinguished guest, a kind guest." Lin Yi was not ambiguous and said directly, "This bag is filled with the corpses of some spirit beasts. Brother Qin, take a look and give me an estimate." "Okay Lin brothers, don't worry. You know me. The price will definitely satisfy you." Qin Heihu immediately called his manservant and began to get busy. However, he himself pulled Lin Yi aside and whispered, "Lin brothers, someone has been looking for you in the market a while ago. It seems that their background is not small. You have to be careful." Lin Yi nodded and said, "Thank you for the reminder, I am very grateful." "Hey, what are you thanking me for? Do you have to be grateful for a reminder between friends? You are treating me like an outsider." Qin Heihu laughed heartily and said, "Recently, those people have been coming less often, but sometimes they still come out to patrol. Lin brothers, as long as you pay a little attention, it should not be a big problem." "I know what to do. Thank you, Brother Qin," Lin Yi responded. Although he knew about this a long time ago, he still had to appreciate the other party's kindness. Otherwise, if it was someone more opportunistic, not to mention reminding him, he would probably secretly find someone to inform the Southern Sky Gate and Wuxia. After all, no matter what, there must be a great reward for providing information. Who would go against a spiritual jade these days? Qin Heihu waved his hand indifferently and then he said, "Oh right, there's another matter. That fellow, the Tattered King, seems to be looking for you as well. I'm just telling Brother Lin about this. Actually, it's right for you to ignore this fellow who only knows how to boast but can't produce any results." Lin Yi couldn't help sweating when he heard this. It had been a few months since he promised to go to the Blue Cloud Pavilion to look for the Raggedy King to forge weapons. Now that it had been a few months, he had completely forgotten about the matter. Speaking of which, he felt a little sorry for the Raggedy King. Although Lin Yi was really busy during this period, he had to prepare for the newcomer assessment and prepare to refine pills to improve his strength. Moreover, when he told the Raggedy King that he would look for him after a while, a few months had passed in the blink of an eye. During this period of time, he had given the Raggedy King the cold shoulder. "This is my mistake. In a few days I will go to the Blue Cloud Pavilion to look for him," Lin Yi replied. Chapter 39-39. While they were talking, several manservants had finished counting the things brought by Lin Yi. After making a list, Qin Heihu quickly gave Lin Yi a fair price of 800 spiritual jade. Lin Yi didn't have any objections to this and immediately nodded in agreement. However, what surprised him was that Qin Heihu could actually swipe a spirit jade card here. Looking at the outer and middle streets of the market, he was the only one who could do this. Spiritual jade card was a rare high-end item. Even a master at the peak of the late stage of the foundation establishment realm like Nan Tianyong couldn't get it, which showed how rare it was. As for the merchants, there were even fewer who had the qualification to swipe the spiritual jade card. On the North Island, except for the giants of the business alliance like the Hong Chamber of Commerce, ordinary merchants didn't have this qualification. From this, it could be seen that Qin Heihu was far from as simple as he looked. His connections were wild enough and his background must be strong enough. If one thought that he was just an ordinary small merchant in the outer street and looked down on him, he might suffer a big loss. Lin Yi suddenly changed his mind and said, "Brother Qin Heihu, besides the business of spiritual beasts, Do you also dabble in spiritual medicine? Chen Heihu was slightly stunned and then replied, of course, spiritual beasts and spiritual medicine are not separated. However, my focus has always been on the spiritual beasts and I don't pay much attention to the spiritual medicine. Lin brothers, why do you ask this? I've been looking for some elixirs recently but they're quite rare. It's hard to buy them normally and I don't come to the market often, so I wanted to see if you could help me. Linny said. He originally planned to ask Hong Zhong to search for the heart-devouring grass, but now after seeing Chen Heihu's ability, he couldn't help but change his mind. With this guy's connections he might be able to get the heart-devouring grass. Well, Chen Heihu habitually stroked his beard and nodded. Okay Lin brothers, write down the spiritual medicine you need. I'll keep an eye on it for you. If I find it I'll take it for you. How about that? I can't thank you enough. We can discuss the price. I won't let you lose out. Lin Yi's heart leapt with joy. Immediately after, he wrote down a list of spiritual medicines on a piece of paper. Other than the heart-devouring exquisite grass, there were also a few other rare spiritual medicines. Naturally this was to fool others. Chen Heihu roughly glanced at it. There was some curiosity in his eyes, but he tactfully did not ask any questions. He directly said, Brother Lin, don't worry. Although these elixirs are indeed difficult to find with my connections, it shouldn't be a big problem. Just wait for the good news. The tone of these words wasn't small, but when it came to Chen Heihu, it didn't seem to be the slightest bit out of place. It was as if he was born with such remarkable abilities. Even Lin Yi couldn't help but sigh to himself. This fellow was an extraordinary person. After he was done, Lin Yi walked out of Chen Heihu's shop and headed towards the inner street. Fishing required a wide net. Even if he thought highly of Chen Heihu, he couldn't put all his hopes on one person. He still had to make a trip to the Hong Chamber of Commerce. Anyway, the Foundation Establishment pill was useful throughout the Foundation Establishment realm. Hence, the heart-devouring exquisite grass was beneficial to Lin Yi. He didn't have to worry about not being able to digest it. On the way to the inner street, Lin Yi didn't forget to pay attention to the small shops in the outer street and the middle street. These places rarely had any high-end goods. However, if he paid attention he might have a chance to pick up some leftover goods. Some people who were knowledgeable and had outstanding eyesight even relied on picking up leftover goods for a living. For example, Wuxia had done this kind of business in the past. Although Lin Yi wasn't like Wuxia who stayed in the library for 3 years and knew all kinds of rare treasures, he still had a ghostly thing on him. No matter how many ancient books Wuxia read in terms of knowledge, even 10 of them couldn't compare to one ghostly thing. There were so many shops in the market. If he really paid attention he would always be able to pick up some leftover goods. As expected, Lin Yi very quickly discovered an unexpected surprise in an inconspicuous roadside stall. It was a pot of blue grass. Its name was blue glow grass. It was considered a relatively common spiritual medicine. However, what Lin Yi was really interested in was not this pot of blue glow grass, but the pile of black mud in the pot that no one would pay attention to. If it wasn't for the ghostly thing's reminder, Lin Yi wouldn't have noticed it. Compared to the ordinary blue glow grass, the origin of this pile of black mud was quite extraordinary. Its name was Pure Land. According to the ghostly thing, this kind of soil only appeared in ancient times. It was a kind of magical soil that could nurture life and spirituality. Due to the changes in the environment, Pure Land gradually became a legend after ancient times. Nowadays, no matter how much money one spent, one might not be able to find it. What made Lin Yi excited was that if Pure Land was used in forging weapons, it could increase the spirituality of weapons. The function of this spirituality could only be understood and not explained. It would not increase the attack power, nor would it increase other special abilities. There might not be any obvious visual effect in a short period of time, but the spirituality of weapons was a mysterious thing. After a long time it would slowly show its magic. A weapon with spirituality and a weapon without spirituality were on two completely different levels. Without spirituality, it would forever be a dead object. Once it developed spirituality, it meant that there were infinite possibilities. Even the legendary growth weapons were no longer out of reach. First, there was the 10,000-year tree crystal, and then there was the ancient Pure Land. As such, Lin Yi was even more interested in the meeting with the King of Junk. Just thinking about how the steel staff would be upgraded was enough to make him look forward to it. However, the most important thing now was to buy the Pure Land. Boss, how much is this pot of blue glow grass? Lin Yi asked without batting an eyelid. When it came to picking up scraps, even if it was to stand out and make a fortune, even though he knew that the ancient Pure Land was a treasure that could only be found by luck, he definitely couldn't show any strange expression on his face. This sort of thing happened all the time in the market, and almost every stall owner was extremely sensitive to it. If Lin Yi were to reveal even the slightest flaw, it'd cause a lot of trouble. The stall owner looked up and down at Lin Yi. He vaguely felt that this person was somewhat familiar, but he couldn't remember him clearly. After all, in the past 2 months, the Southern Heaven Gate and Wuxia had gradually quieted down. Even if he had seen Lin Yi's portrait before, his impression of him was already blurred. 7 pieces of spiritual jade. The stall owner was too lazy to think any further. He immediately called out the price. Chapter 39-40. Seeing that Lin Yi was so experienced, the stall owner could not help but feel his aura stagnate. He said weakly, "Then I will take a step back. 6 spirit jades. You see, the quality of my blue glow grass is very good. It is not something that can be found anywhere." Lin Yi extended a hand unhurriedly. 5 spirit jades, no more? You. The stall owner originally wanted to try again, but seeing Lin Yi's determined expression, he thought that the price of 5 spirit jades was already a good deal for the blue glow grass. In the end, he could only nod and say, "All right, then 5 spirit jades it is. I will put it away for you." After saying that, the stall owner habitually scooped out the blue glow grass from the pot. People who came out to buy spirit medicine were basically for alchemy and not to buy it to plant. Therefore, they usually took it away in a bag, which was convenient to carry around. Lin Yi's eyelids twitched and he hurriedly stopped him. "Wait, boss, just give me the pot directly. I will bring it back to plant." What kind of joke was this? He was here for the ancient Pure Land in the basin. Buying the blue glow grass was just a cover to deceive others. "All right, up to you." Since it was just an ordinary pot, the stall owner did not suspect anything and directly nodded in agreement. Lin Yi heaved a sigh of relief. As he took out the spirit jades, he probed, "Excuse me for asking, boss, where do you usually cultivate spirit medicine? I see that the quality of your spirit medicine is quite good." His words of probing was actually because he wanted to know the other party's looks. If he could find out, he might be able to get more pure lands. "Hee hee, you flatter me. I don't know how to cultivate spirit medicine. These are all bought from others. For example, your pot of blue glow grass, including the soil, was bought from an unfamiliar loose cultivator." The stall owner took the spirit jades from Lin Yi and laughed happily. "So that's how it is." Lin Yi nodded his head in disappointment. In that case, it would be useless even if he continued to ask. He could only let it go. However, just as Lin Yi took the pot of blue light grass and was about to turn around and leave, a familiar voice suddenly came from behind him. "Young hero Lin, what a coincidence to see you here." Lin Yi's body suddenly stiffened. Even without turning his head, he could easily tell that the owner of the voice was his old enemy, Meng Jueguang. What was this guy doing here? What shocked Lin Yi even more was how Meng Jueguang could recognize him when he was wearing the thousand silk mask. Just as Lin Yi was stunned, Meng Jueguang, however, had already walked to his side. Uncharacteristically, he patted his shoulder affectionately and said with a face full of joy, "Young hero Lin, even if we have a little conflict, you don't have to pretend that you don't know me, do you? No matter what, I'm still your steward senior brother." There was no way to avoid it. Lin Yi could only bite the bullet and face him face. He pretended to be confused and said, "Who are you?" Hearing this, Meng Jueguang was startled and looked at Lin Yi. Then, his expression suddenly changed and he said awkwardly, "So you're not Lin Yi. I got the wrong person." Lin Yi instantly let out a sigh of relief. As long as he didn't recognize him, it was fine. If Meng Jueguang found out that Lin Yi was the same person as him, then this matter would be really dangerous. At that time, Meng Jueguang would spread the news to the Southern Sky Gate. Even with Lin Yi's current Foundation establishment middle stage strength, it would be very difficult to deal with such a strong enemy. Whether or not he could keep his life was still unknown. Not daring to stay any longer, Lin Yi picked up the pot of blue light grass and glanced at Meng Jueguang. After that, he turned around and left. Looking at Lin Yi's hurried back, Meng Jueguang rubbed his chin thoughtfully. He couldn't help but mutter, from the back, "Why does this person look exactly like Lin Yi? Not only is their figure similar, but even their temperament is exactly the same. What the hell?" Inadvertently, Meng Jueguang's gaze swept across the stall owner's hand. Suddenly he was slightly stunned. The spiritual jade in the stall owner's hand was actually very familiar to him. "Stall owner, let me take a look at your spiritual jade." A thought flashed through Meng Jueguang's mind and he hurriedly called out, "What?" The stall owner looked at him warily. This person must be sick in the head. Who would ask someone for a spiritual jade for no reason? Was he trying to rob someone in broad daylight? Meng Jueguang casually took out 2 spiritual jades and threw them in front of the stall owner. He said hurriedly, "I'll give you 2 spiritual jades in exchange for 1. This should be fine, right? Hurry up and give it to me." The stall owner took the 2 spiritual jades and examined them suspiciously. He found that they were both good jades full of spiritual energy. Only then did he throw the spiritual jade that Meng Jueguang pointed at. Meng Jueguang took it and carefully examined it twice. He thoroughly confirmed that the spiritual jade in his hand was actually the one that he had used before. Speaking of which, this was a complete coincidence. As everyone knew, the process of cultivation had always been boring. Once, when he used spiritual jades to cultivate, Meng Jueguang once had a whim and wanted to try microcarving spiritual jades. In the end, it turned out that he did not have this talent at all. A beautiful woman had been carved deeply and shallowly by him. It was extremely ugly and unsightly. Thus, there was this strange spiritual jade in his hand. However, Meng Jueguang remembered clearly that this strange spiritual jade should have been given to Meng Tong along with the other useless spiritual jades to be exchanged with Lin Yi. Why would it appear here inexplicably? In addition, there was another thing that greatly puzzled Meng Jueguang. The spiritual jade that he had given to Meng Tong was a useless spiritual jade that had almost exhausted most of its spiritual energy. However, the spiritual jade in his hand was clearly full of spiritual energy. Today's matter was really strange. But if this spiritual jade in his hand was not the original one, then it was too much of a coincidence. The spiritual jade of similar size had similar patterns on it. At that time, Meng Jueguang remembered clearly that when he was bored, he randomly carved a pattern on this spiritual jade. It was a symbol that represented him, Meng Jueguang. Of course, only he himself knew what it meant. If one did not look carefully, they would definitely think that it was accidentally formed when mining spiritual jades. It was no big deal. If Meng Jueguang was a famous microcarving master, then it would not be strange. The signature or symbol of a microcarving master had always been highly sought after. It was normal for people to deliberately imitate it. However, the problem was that he was a complete layman. Why would people waste spiritual jades to imitate a failed product like him? Chapter 39-41. This guess could not be said to be not bold and bizarre, but this kind of thing might not be completely impossible. Meng Jueguang knew that the Spirit Jade Hall had a special method to instill spiritual energy into the waste jade, turning it into a treasure. However, this process was extremely long, requiring at least a few hundred years before it was possible. The world was vast and full of extraordinary things. Cultivators were all people with hundreds of wisdom and remarkable abilities. Since there was the precedent of the Spirit Jade Hall, charging the spiritual jade in a short period of time might seem unreliable, but it might not be impossible. If that was the case, then the meaning of this spiritual jade really needed to be carefully considered. "Boss, where did you get this spiritual jade?" Meng Jueguang's heart stirred as he asked. The stall owner gave him a baffled look, curled his lips and said, "It was given by the customer just now." It really was him. This answer made Meng Jueguang's heart tremble. Now he finally reacted. The first time he saw this person, he felt that he was extremely familiar, because he had seen this person's face before. Back when Wuxia came out to look for Lin Er, he had Lin Er's portrait in his hand. Although it was somewhat different from the real person, the general outline was correct. And Meng Jueguang just happened to have looked at this portrait carefully. In other words, the person whom he had mistaken as Lin Yi should be the Lin Er that Southern Sky Gate and Wuxia had been looking for. And what made Meng Jueguang even more suspicious was that this Lin Er actually had his strange spiritual jade. The strange spiritual jade that should have been in Lin Yi's hands, what did this mean? In addition, in order to find this Lin Er, Wuxia had run to the Welcome Pavilion several times. The truth behind this was already on the verge of being revealed. Right now, Meng Jueguang was at least 70% sure that Lin Yi and Lin Er should be the same person, just that they had used some kind of method to change their appearance. In the cultivation world, changing one's appearance was not uncommon. Aside from using tools like the human skin mask, even some unorthodox martial techniques could achieve the same effect. Even Meng Jueguang himself found this speculation hard to believe. But if he thought about it carefully, he would realize that all the signs from before could corroborate each other. Just this point alone was enough to explain the doubts that Meng Jueguang had for a long time. The waste jade with sparse spiritual qi suddenly became a good jade with abundant spiritual qi. Although he had been urging Meng Tong and the others at the beginning, the instigator of using the despicable method of exchanging a useless jade for a good jade to trick Lin Yi was Meng Jueguang himself. And because the same method had succeeded time and time again, Meng Jueguang was secretly pleased. At the same time, he also thought that Lin Yi was an idiot who couldn't even distinguish a useless jade from a good jade. But then, as he stumbled over Lin Yi again and again, and even watched Lin Yi grow step by step into an expert that even he himself was afraid of, Meng Jueguang couldn't help but suspect that Lin Yi was a legendary newcomer. How could he have gotten to where he was today? How could he have come to such a stage today? Moreover, who was Meng Jueguang? This kind of thing. Even if he used his toes to think, he would know that there must be more to it than meets the eye. Only a brainless idiot like Meng Tong, but he, Meng Jueguang, was a smart person. Even if he got carried away for a while, he would naturally come back to his senses after a long time. Now that he thought about it, exchanging a useless jade for a good jade, this kind of trick was probably exactly what Lin Yi wanted. It was obvious that this guy had been baiting them to give him useless jade so he could always get his way. Otherwise, even if Lin Yi was really stupid, the people around him would have stopped him when they realized that something was wrong. They wouldn't have let it happen until now and never cared about it. For a normal person, exchanging a good jade in their hands for a useless jade in someone else's hands, even if it could be exchanged for many, would be an out-and-out wastrel. But Lin Yi was obviously different. If his speculation was right, he should have some kind of way to quickly charge the useless jade. Only this could explain why the spiritual jade in Meng Jueguang's hand inexplicably turned from a useless piece of jade to a good piece of jade. Only this could explain why the simple trick of replacing a useless piece of jade with a good piece of jade, which could be seen through by ordinary people, could actually succeed time and time again. All of this was obviously a trap set by Lin Yi, waiting for them to come to him and give him the useless jade. To think that they were so complacent at first, thinking that it was rare for them to take advantage of Lin Yi. Now that they thought about it, from the beginning to the end, they were basically played by this guy. In this way, all the things that happened before and after were linked together. The truth was already on the verge of being revealed. Even if there were still some doubts, they just needed to be further confirmed. Now, from Meng Jueguang's point of view, the fact that Lin Yi was Lin Air was basically impossible to run away from. Today's trip to the market really wasn't in vain. After thinking through all of these, Meng Jueguang couldn't help but sneer. Originally, because of Lin Yi's previous domineering performance, he had already planned to reconcile with Lin Yi. After all, a wise man submits to circumstances. This was also something that couldn't be helped. Now that Lin Yi's strength was so strong that even Meng Jueguang felt frightened, what else could he do? Now that things had developed to this point, it was simply unrealistic for him to count on his subordinates to kill Lin Yi. Regardless of whether it was Meng Tong or Murong Zhen, they were far from being Lin Yi's opponent. After all, Meng Jueguang was a smart person. He had already deeply understood that if he and Lin Yi were to openly oppose each other, he would definitely be the one to suffer in the end. Meng Tong had already gone around the gates of hell once. If he came again, he would probably be dead. If things really developed to that point, Meng Jueguang would definitely be in a passive position. At that time, even if he was promoted to third pavilion master, if he didn't have any subordinates, it would be impossible for him to suppress the overbearing Lin Yi. His situation was likely to be even more embarrassing and tragic than Liu Bianren's. Therefore, as a last resort, Meng Jueguang decided to temporarily pretend to be courteous with Lin Yi. As long as he could temporarily stabilize the situation, it didn't matter even if he lost some face. When he stabilized his position as third pavilion master in the future, it wouldn't be too late to settle the score then. Chapter 39-42. However, these were all his previous thoughts. As for now, since he had such a fatal weakness of Lin Yi, things were completely different. As long as this weakness could be confirmed, then the current situation would no longer be him bowing his head to Lin Yi. Instead, it would be the other way around and he would make Lin Yi bow his head to him. Meng Jueguang sneered. If he could make good use of this weakness, no matter how strong and powerful Lin Yi was, he wouldn't be able to escape from his palm. What made him even happier was that Lin Yi could turn a useless jade into a good one, wasn't he? He was like a hen that laid golden eggs. As long as he could control Lin Yi, he'd be able to soar in the future. Wouldn't that be a problem? According to Meng Jueguang's speculation, this secret should be in the number 10 spiritual jade mining area. Because in the secular world, Lin Yi didn't know what spiritual jade was at all. After Lin Yi entered the number 10 mining area, he continuously mined good jade from it. Now it seemed that there was an existence similar to the spiritual eye in the number 10 mining area. As long as waste jade was placed in it, it could be filled up quickly. This also explained why Lin Yi could dig up good jade, while he and Meng Tong couldn't. The jade wasn't dug up but rushed out. At this moment Lin Yi, who was on the other side, was really scared out of his wits. Even with his temperament he was still scared. Although his response just now didn't reveal any flaws on the surface, his intuition told him that Meng Jueguang was as cunning as a fox. He shouldn't be fooled so easily. Be prepared for the worst. The only thing that Lin Yi needed to consider now was what he should do if Meng Jueguang really found out about his identity. If it really came to that, Lin Yi's situation could be said to be very unfavorable. Meng Jueguang could easily use this weakness to deal with him, but he couldn't do much to the other party. The other party was the eldest senior brother in charge. After that, it might be the third pavilion master. No matter how strong Lin Yi was, he wouldn't have the chance to face him head-on unless he took the risk and found a chance to assassinate him. This method might not be completely impossible, but it would be extremely risky. Now that things have come to this, we can only take it one step at a time. Lin Yi shook his head. He couldn't be sure whether Meng Jueguang had found out or not, so he could only stay put for the time being. On this trip to the market today, he didn't run into Wuxia and the others who were scheming to find him. Instead, it was accidentally discovered by Meng Jueguang. This kind of thing could not be described as a scam, it was simply a scam of 18 generations of ancestors. Wiping away the cold sweat on his forehead, Lin Yi suppressed his worries and made a trip to the Hong Chamber of Commerce as planned. With regards to Lin Yi's sudden visit, even a calm old shopkeeper like Hong Zhong couldn't help but click his tongue in wonder. Unlike Lin Yi, with Hong Zhong's position and level, as well as his close relationship with many of the upper echelons of the three great pavilions, even the slightest movement from the three great pavilions could not escape his eyes and ears. Perhaps in Lin Yi's knowledge, the ones who were investigating his identity were only the Southern Sky Gate and Wuxia. But Hong Zhong knew that Nan Tianba, the eldest of the three heroes of the Nan family, had already returned from a mission. This person, even in the circle of core disciples of the three great pavilions, was famous for being not to be trifled with. Furthermore, with the backing of the Nantian family of the Middle Island, many of the upper echelons of the three great pavilions were rather tolerant of him. Not to mention Nan Tianba's protectiveness. It had always been common knowledge that when he found out about Nan Tianyong's death, he would definitely fly into a rage. Although for some unknown reason he hadn't made any big movements for the time being, one thing was certain, this person would definitely not relax in tracking down the murderer of his brother. When facing the threat of such a formidable enemy, nothing had actually happened to Lin Air until now. Not only was he safe and sound, he even dared to openly walk around the market. Even Hong Zhong couldn't help but be flabbergasted by such courage and ability. What shocked Hong Zhong even more was that in just a short span of 2 to 3 months, Lin Yi's strength had actually skyrocketed again. Lin Yi's middle stage of the Foundation establishment realm could fool others, but he couldn't fool Hong Zhong. With Hong Zhong's unfathomable strength and eyesight, unless it was an expert of the same level, no one could hide their realm in front of him. Even Lin Yi was no exception. This Lin Yi looked very young, and the last time they met, Hong Zhong could clearly feel that he had not advanced for long. However, he didn't expect that from the peak of the early stage of the Foundation establishment realm to the middle stage of the Foundation establishment realm, a threshold that a normal person might not be able to cross in 100 years, could be reached in just a short span of 2 to 3 months. Even Hong Zhong, who had seen countless people, had never seen or heard of this kind of thing. Young hero Lin, long time no see, I trust you have been well. Hong Zhong secretly suppressed the surprise in his heart and took the initiative to greet him. Shopkeeper Hong, I trust you have been well since we last met. Lin Yi smiled and cupped his hands in greeting, then immediately went straight to the point. One does not come to a temple without a cause. Today I have come to ask for a favor, and I hope Shopkeeper Hong can help me. Well said, well said. If there is anything young hero Lin needs, please say it. This old man will definitely do his best. Hong Zhong immediately said straightforwardly. Having seen countless people, Hong Zhong had developed a good eyesight. Now in Hong Zhong's heart, Lin Yi was a stock with unquestionable potential. In the future, it was very likely that he would become a person with great achievements. Being calculative was too short-sighted. At this time, to be able to do Lin Yi a favor in his eyes was a good thing that he could not ask for more. Lin Yi was overjoyed. He immediately repeated what he had said to Chen Heihu to Hong Zhong. After listening, Hong Zhong immediately called the shopkeeper over and gave him some instructions. To him, it was a small matter to purchase rare elixirs such as the heart-devouring exquisite grass. To him it was just a small matter. Once he gave the order, someone would naturally do it for him. With such a simple matter he could sell a rare favor to Lin Yi. Even if it was measured purely by the eyes of a businessman, it was still a great profit. Then, thank you very much, shopkeeper Hong. Lin Yi said gratefully. In this way he finally had some confidence as to whether or not he could obtain the heart-devouring exquisite grass. With a Chamber of Commerce giant like the Hong Chamber of Commerce and a resourceful unorthodox person like Qin Heihu working together, if they still could not purchase the heart-devouring exquisite grass, then it could only be said that this was the will of heaven. Lin Yi had no fate with the heart-devouring exquisite grass. Young hero Lin is too polite. Hong Zhong smiled. Before Lin Yi left, he specially reminded him, the eldest of the three heroes of the Nan family, Nan Tianba, has returned. This person is not to be underestimated. Recently, he seemed to have encountered some trouble, so there has been no news of him. However, don't underestimate him. Chapter 39-43. If it was before, the information wouldn't have affected Lin Yi too much. After all, he had successfully diverted the attention of the Southern Sky Gate and Yuzhi to Kang Ming. If Nan Qianba were to return, he should have been misled as well. However, the sudden situation just now had placed the danger in front of Lin Yi. If Meng Jueguang had really seen through his identity and leaked the information to the Southern Sky Gate and Yuzhi, then he would have to consider one thing: how to deal with Nan Qianba. Now that he had broken through to the middle stage of the Foundation establishment realm, Lin Yi's strength had skyrocketed. If he was given a good opportunity, he might be able to deal with the Southern Sky Gate like how he killed Nan Tianyong. However, if his opponent was Nan Qianba, who was on a completely different level, then there was nothing he could do. Although he was unwilling to admit it, it was the truth. Facing such a powerful opponent, Lin Yi had no chance of winning. He could only run for his life, and he might not even be able to escape. To prepare for a rainy day, Lin Yi had to think of a way to prepare. If he allowed the situation to develop to this stage, then it would truly be a tragedy. After leaving the Hong Merchant Guild, Lin Yi did not stay for long. He immediately returned to the Welcome Pavilion. However, before returning to his cave abode, he purposely found a secluded corner to observe from afar. The scene that he saw caused his heart to skip a beat. Meng Jueguang and Murong Zhen were sitting next to the tea table beside the wooden house, flirting and chatting over tea. Lin Yi was not surprised at all by this adulterous couple hanging out together. However, Meng Jueguang's appearance here was definitely not to fool around with Murong Zhen. It was obvious that he had an ulterior motive. This Meng Jueguang was obviously trying to use this opportunity to confirm if he was the same Lin heir that he had met at the market. Luckily, Lin Yi was cautious enough to keep an eye out. Otherwise, if he suddenly appeared, even if Meng Jueguang was still a little uncertain, he would definitely be a suspect now. Lin Yi immediately dispelled the idea of going back to the cave immediately. He stayed where he was and started to waste time with Meng Jueguang. In any case, Lin Yi had always been in closed-door cultivation. As long as he did not take the initiative to appear, Meng Jueguang would not be able to confirm whether he was in the cave or not. Even if he tried to call the door, it would be useless. Cultivators never ignored people when they were in closed-door cultivation. Meng Jueguang stayed in Murong Zhen's wooden house until the middle of the night. When he didn't see Lin Yi, he finally left resentfully. Before he left, he didn't give up and told Murong Zhen to keep an eye on Lin Yi's whereabouts. However, Lin Yi's patience was far beyond that of an ordinary person. After Meng Jueguang left, he waited until he was sure that Murong Zhen was completely silent and let down his guard before he quietly returned to his cave. This response might not be able to dispel Meng Jueguang's suspicions, but it was still better than having his suspicions confirmed. As long as there was no concrete evidence, this matter was still groundless. Meng Jueguang did not dare to act recklessly. This was the only chance Lin Yi could fight for. A few days later, Meng Jueguang did not continue to look for trouble. There was no news from Southern Sky Gate or Yuzhi either. Lin Yi's response seemed to be quite effective. Following that, Welcoming Pavilion's pavilion master, Hu Yunfeng, gathered all the newcomers. Once again, all the rookies from the three pavilions were gathered together. Although the rookie assessment had ended, it did not mean that the rookies were completely free. Before the announcement of the newcomer assessment, Hu Yunfeng had personally said to all the newcomers that she would give the newcomers from Mysterious Pavilion and Blue Cloud Pavilion a chance to challenge the other pavilions. Challenge the other pavilions? Ever since the newcomers joined the Welcoming Pavilion, so many things had happened, and so many trials had taken place. This was the first time something like this had happened. Before this, the three pavilions had always done it separately. In an instant, the newcomers from the three pavilions had a tense atmosphere. Putting aside the internal affairs of each pavilion, This could be considered a competition between the three pavilions. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was a battle between the three pavilions. At least at a time like this, the newcomers at the scene still had some collective consciousness. The reason for this challenge was to show fairness. Although everyone knew that the strong preyed on the weak was the unchanging rule of the cultivation world, as the upper echelons of the three pavilions, they had to at least put on a show. Even if it couldn't shut everyone's mouth, it was enough to make most people speechless. At this moment, the atmosphere at the scene was unprecedentedly tense. Furthermore, the difference in treatment was obvious. Many newcomers from Mysterious Pavilion and Blue Cloud Pavilion coveted the mountaintop cave abodes of the Soaring Sky Pavilion newcomers. They dreamed of replacing them. Now that the opportunity was right in front of them, they were all hesitant to move forward. They were the typical people who love dragons. As the weakest group in the three great pavilions, they all wanted so-called fairness. However, when they were given the chance to use their strength to fight against others, they didn't have the confidence to do so. Apart from Lin Yi and a few other freakish newcomers, the Soaring Sky Pavilion was obviously far superior to the other two pavilions in terms of strength, especially the newcomers from Blue Cloud Pavilion. Even if people like Lin Yi and Murong Zhen were included, among the newcomers from Blue Cloud Pavilion, only 6 had successfully reached the Foundation Establishment realm. The rest were only at the peak of the Heaven stage. Meanwhile, among the newcomers from Soaring Sky Pavilion, there were already a total of 10 early-stage Foundation Establishment experts. As for the newcomers of Soaring Sky Pavilion, over the past few months, their respective deep backgrounds had finally begun to play a role. Even if they couldn't obtain building foundation pills during the newcomer trial, they could still obtain them through various private channels. With their talent and background coupled with the fact that they had enough pills, the success rate of breaking through to the Foundation Establishment realm was naturally not low. Among the 15 newcomers from Soaring Sky Pavilion, there were 10 early-stage Foundation Establishment experts. This was clear proof. As for the newcomers from Mysterious Pavilion, although this group of old men could be considered tyrannical during their time as newcomers, breaking through to the Foundation Establishment realm did not depend solely on strength. In terms of pills and resources, they clearly could not compare to the second and third generation cultivators from Soaring Sky Pavilion. As a result, there were only 6 people who had successfully reached the Foundation Establishment realm, which was equal to the newcomers from Blue Cloud Pavilion. Overall, the comparison of the strength of the newcomers from the 3 pavilions was not much different from previous years. Soaring Sky Pavilion was the strongest, followed by Mysterious Pavilion, and Blue Cloud Pavilion was still the weakest. Chapter 39-44. Now that the so-called Fair Cross Pavilion Challenge opportunity was placed in front of them, they were rendered speechless and looked at each other. Pavilion Master Hu Yunfeng took in the expressions of the newcomers and could not help but sneer in his heart. Didn't you bunch of newcomers clamor for fairness? Now that a great opportunity is placed in front of you, this Pavilion Master wants to see how you're going to face this fairness that you've been dreaming of. Faced with such a gap in strength, the Mysterious Pavilion and Blue Cloud Pavilion newcomers, who were originally full of ambition, were all speechless for a moment. Although the Soaring Pavilion newcomers were powerful, it did not mean that every one of them was an early-stage Foundation Establishment expert. Among the 15, at least 5 of them were only at the Heaven stage Great Perfection, which was not very strong. But the problem was that if only a few people came forward to challenge, even if they succeeded, it was obvious what kind of situation they would face when they reached the Soaring Pavilion's territory. Not only would they become the target of public criticism, they might even be blacklisted by many Soaring Pavilion disciples. From then on, they would be targeted everywhere and it would be difficult for them to advance. This was not a consequence that ordinary newcomers could bear. In the end, the mentality of cultivators was not much different from that of ordinary people. When one's strength was not strong enough, they would have a herd mentality. If everyone issued a challenge to the Soaring Pavilion newcomers, then perhaps many people would be eager to try. But now, with everyone's apprehension, the scene inevitably fell into an awkward silence. In the eyes of the Mysterious Pavilion newcomers, although the Soaring Pavilion's mountaintop cave abode was good, their current cave abode was not bad either. It was just that the gap was not enough for them to take the risk out of desperation. As for the Blue Cloud Pavilion newcomers, they were truly envious of the mountaintop cave abode, but most of them were only at the Heaven stage Great Perfection. Even if they faced the weakest newcomer from the Soaring Pavilion, they might not have a chance of winning. If they really jumped out to challenge, they would be laughed at instead. What? Isn't this something all of you strongly requested? Now that the matter has come to a head, why aren't any of you saying anything? Hu Yunfeng deliberately swept her gaze over the clear cloud pavilion's new disciples, her eyebrows raised in disdain. The newcomers were all speechless and unconsciously shrunk their necks. At this time they did not dare to rashly stand out. An interpavilion challenge? This is something that you all strongly requested. This pavilion master deliberately applied to the higher-ups, but in the end you don't even dare to fart. If you're so cowardly and irresponsible, how can you achieve great things in the future? As Hu Yunfeng reprimanded the rookies, his eyes finally landed on Xiao Hongkai. He still clearly remembered that this fellow had shouted the loudest back then. Being stared at by Hu Yunfeng like this, Xiao Hongkai couldn't hold it in anymore. He had a fiery temper. How could he stand Hu Yunfeng's provocation? Not to mention with his current strength. Unless the opponent was an expert at the peak of the early stage of the foundation-building realm like Meng Tong or Murong Zhen, they should have a certain chance of winning against any expert from the Soaring Sky Pavilion. However, Lin Yi had given them instructions beforehand. He told him and Xiao Ran not to challenge him recklessly. Whether it was him, Xiao Hongkai or Xiao Ran, they were not the kind of people who like to pick on pushovers. However, if they were to challenge the early-stage foundation-building realm experts of the same level in the Soaring Sky Pavilion, it was hard to say how much of a chance they had of winning. The risk was not small. Moreover, because of Lin Yi's existence, he could guarantee that the two of them would have enough medicinal pills. In comparison, the demand for the cave abode at the top of the mountain was not too high. It was just that it was not worth taking such a risk for the cave abode at the top of the mountain. Xiao Hongkai had a fiery temper, but he had always listened to Lin Yi. Since Lin Yi had already spoken, he could only suppress his impulse. He simply closed his eyes and ignored Hu Yunfeng's mockery. Xiao Hongkai ignored Hu Yunfeng and Xiao Ran even less so. As for the other experts from Clear Cloud Pavilion, Meng Tong was still in a state of recovering from his severe injuries. Murong Zhen was kicked out by the Soaring Sky Pavilion in the first place, so there was no reason for them to rush up to Clear Cloud Pavilion's doorstep to make a fool out of themselves. Li Jingming was determined to keep a low profile. None of them had any intention of stepping out to challenge Hu Yunfeng. Still no one wants to challenge you? This pavilion lord has heard many people talking about how amazing this batch of Clear Cloud Pavilion's new disciples are, how heaven-defying they are. Too bad it looks like it's all a joke. Cowering like a turtle, is this the so-called strength in your eyes? Hu Yunfeng continued to provoke them with cold words. Not only was he unforgiving, but this was also a rare opportunity for him to consolidate his prestige. He wanted to teach these ignorant newcomers a lesson so that he could manage them better in the future. But he had forgotten that not all newbies would be suppressed by his schemes. At least Lin Yi wouldn't be able to do so. Not allowing Xiao Hongkai and Xiao Ran to challenge him did not mean that Lin Yi could not do it. With his current strength he could absolutely suppress any newcomer. There was no risk at all. Pavilion Lord Hu, you haven't even announced the specific rules. How are people supposed to challenge you? Don't you think it's too early to say that you're a coward? Lin Yi said indifferently. Hu Yunfeng's face turned red. He immediately realized that he had been a little too hasty. He straightened his neck and said, "You newcomer really have no understanding. Do you need me to say more about this? The rules are naturally the same as the challenge. The only difference is that you can challenge other pavilions." Lin Yi smiled nonchalantly. He then stood up and said, "All right, I'll take the lead and challenge the newcomer from the Soaring Pavilion, Kong Ming Ming." As soon as he said this, the audience suddenly went into an uproar. Everyone's eyes immediately focused on Kong Ming Ming. Looking at all the newcomers from the three pavilions, there were two people in the limelight. One was the monstrous Rising Blue Cloud Pavilion's Lin Yi, and the other was the Soaring Pavilion's Kong Ming Ming, who was supported by young Master Su and Pavilion Lord Hu Yunfeng. The key was that these two people came from the secular world. It was said that there was even a deep hatred between them. Unfortunately, because the two of them belonged to the Blue Cloud Pavilion and the Soaring Pavilion respectively, in the eyes of the public, they were basically kings that didn't meet each other. There had never been a chance for a head-on confrontation. But this time the opportunity finally came. Everyone present had the intention to watch the show. Being called out by Lin Yi in public, Kong Ming Ming had long expected this. With the conflict between him and Lin Yi would definitely seize this opportunity to attack him. Therefore, Kong Ming Ming had been secretly preparing since the beginning. It was just that his trump card was not ready yet. Chapter 39:45. It was the same excuse again. It was almost the same as when he dealt with Yuda during the newcomer challenge. During this period of time, Kang Ming had used similar tricks many times. After all, he was different from Lin Yi. As an alchemist, even if he had a backer like Su Lingchong and relied on elixirs to succeed in building his foundation, his actual combat power was still lacking. He didn't have any powerful martial arts skills, so he had almost no chance of winning when facing an expert of the same level. Fortunately, he had learned the alchemic fire bomb. The lethality of this move was beyond doubt. The only weakness was that it required a long preparation time. If he didn't use other means to delay, his opponent wouldn't be stupid enough to give him such an opportunity after he entered the ring. Another point was that the alchemic fire bomb might be immune to certain mental cultivation methods. However, Kang Ming wasn't stupid. He would choose his opponent to use it on. You need some time? Lin Yi raised his eyebrows. With the various conflicts between him and Kang Ming's little scheme certainly couldn't escape his eyes. However, he didn't intend to expose it in public. He said with an indifferent expression, "Up to you. After all, you're a newcomer. You have to have some privileges." This sentence made all the newcomers look at Kang Ming with some unfriendliness and jealousy. Unlike Lin Yi, even if others were jealous of Lin Yi's limelight, they were still in awe of Lin Yi's powerful strength in private. However, Kang Ming was different. Other than Su Lingchong and Pavilion Master Hu Yunfeng's care, no one could see any signs of strength from this guy. Although there were a few times when he made a move, it was a strong performance of killing his opponent in one move. However, the feeling that Kang Ming gave people was that he wasn't a real powerhouse, but more like a treacherous villain who relied on pampering to get his position. It was normal for people to look down on people like that. Even if Lin Yi wasn't a popular guy, if he could step all over Kang Xiaoming, he'd be able to do it. That would be to everyone's satisfaction. Kang Ming didn't care about everyone's unkind eyes at all. Instead, he grinned. Lin Yi was still as stupid and arrogant as ever. That's perfect. I'll use the pill fire bomb to send you to the Western Paradise. At that time, I'll take a good look at the faces of these people. After dawdling for a while, everything was ready. Kang Ming slowly walked into the ring with a victorious smile. Yao Yao hooked her finger at Lin Yi and said, "Come on, we can finally put an end to this. However, let me say this first. Although we are old acquaintances, I can't guarantee that I will be merciful. I might even kill you later." It's really hard to understand. You're just a guy who only knows how to take advantage of the situation. Where do you get your confidence and courage from? Just by stalling for time? Lin Yi smiled indifferently. Kang Ming was never a strong opponent in his eyes. He was never a strong enemy in his eyes. At most, he was on the same level as Meng Tong. Even if he was smarter than Meng Tong, it was a pity that his strength was still his weakness. In front of absolute strength, any strategy was just a joke. Moreover, Kang Ming's little trick was not a strategy at all. At most, it was just an insignificant skill. Insignificant skill? You can only show off your eloquence at this time. If you die with grievances later, don't blame me. Kang Ming sneered. In terms of strength, he did admit that he was not Lin Yi's opponent. He still had this self-awareness. However, now that the pill fire bomb was ready, what could Lin Yi do even if he was strong? A pill fire bomb was thrown at his face. Last time, Yuda was blasted into a cripple on the spot. Now, after a few months, he was still a cripple. Lin Yi, this arrogant fool, was about to follow in his footsteps. As they spoke, the two of them stood at one end of the arena. The audience unconsciously held their breath and opened their eyes wide in anticipation of this rare duel. Lin Yi was the strongest newcomer in Blue Cloud Pavilion. This was without a doubt. As for Kang Ming, at least in terms of fame and popularity, he was also the #1 newcomer in Soaring Sky Pavilion. Therefore, the duel between the two of them could be regarded as the pinnacle duel among the newcomers in Welcoming Pavilion. With Pavilion Master Hu Yunfeng's order, the pinnacle duel among the newcomers officially began. However, in Kang Ming's eyes, the duel had just begun and was already over. Because in his expectation, as long as he threw the pill fire bomb in his hand at Lin Yi's face, Lin Yi would definitely die. However, judging from Lin Yi's expression, this fool should not be completely aware of the danger. Kang Ming really did not expect that the various grievances between him and Lin Yi in the secular world would end in such a duel after coming to Heaven Stage Island. Moreover, he would personally kill Lin Yi in front of everyone. This was a wonderful scene that could only appear in a dream. Go to hell. Kang Ming roared ferociously. He immediately threw the pill fire bomb in his hand at Lin Yi's face without hesitation. At the same time, he erupted with all the strength in his body and retreated with all his might. The pill firebomb was not only extremely powerful, but it also did not have eyes. If one was not careful, it was very likely that even Kang Ming Ming would be killed. That would be terrible. Therefore, it was better to stay as far away from it as possible. However, just as the pill firebomb was about to leave his hand, Lin Yi, who was originally dozens of feet away, suddenly moved. Before Kang Ming Ming could react, he had already appeared in front of him the next moment. Your speed is really a mess. Lin Yi smiled coldly and then grabbed Kang Ming Ming's left hand with one hand. He curled his lips and said, "It seems that you are hiding something in your hand. Do you need my help?" In an instant, Kang Ming Ming was so scared that he had goosebumps all over his body. Not only was he shocked by Lin Yi's terrifying speed, but more importantly at this moment in his left hand, there was a pill firebomb that had been prepared for a long time. If this thing was held in his hand for a long time, even he himself would not be able to control it. If it accidentally exploded in his hand, then it would be a big joke. Hey, do you want to die? Let go of me, bastard. Kang Ming Ming was so anxious that he was flustered. The trump card suddenly became a hot potato and a life-threatening talisman. Chapter 3946. When Lin Yi spoke, Kang Ming was so anxious that he was sweating profusely. At this moment he even wanted to cut off his own hand with a knife. In any case, it was better to lose a hand than to lose his life. New Deacon, you seem to be very scared. Don't you want to kill me with this pill fire bomb? Why don't we play a game? We'll stand here and see who dies first? Lin Yi said with a teasing smile. What? Stand here and don't move. Are you a madman or a fool? Kang Ming Ming was so scared that his face turned pale. If Lin Yi was just a strong enemy in his eyes before, then now this guy had become an out-and-out madman. Kang Xiaoming wanted to kill Lin Yi even in his dreams. The stronger Lin Yi was, the stronger his desire for vengeance was. However, if the opponent was a madman who didn't know what was good for him, then it was a different story. Who would want to risk their lives against a madman? However, no matter how Kang Ming Ming struggled, Lin Yi just held his hand and didn't move at all. After all, the strength gap between them was too big. Lin Yi was already a master in the middle stage of the Foundation Establishment realm, while Kang Ming Ming was only in the early stage of the Foundation Establishment realm. They were 2 levels apart. How could a guy who couldn't even defeat a master of the same level break free from Lin Yi's hand? Hey, you madman, let go of me. I really can't hold it anymore. This time Kang Ming Ming was really scared by Lin Yi. The feeling of holding a bomb in his hand and it would explode at any time was as horrifying as it could be. The key point was that this pillfire bomb was made by him, so he knew how powerful it was. Once it really exploded, he didn't know what would happen to the madman Lin Yi, but at least he knew that he was definitely going to die this time. It was impossible to leave a whole body. The most crucial problem was, alchemic fire was irreversible. Once it was activated, it could not be taken back. This was completely different from Lin Yi's true chi bomb. Can't hold on any longer? Lin Yi's expression was as calm as ever. Then let go. You haven't tasted your own pill flame bomb, have you? In Kang Xiaoming's eyes, however, Lin Yi was as evil as he could imagine. This was the first time he felt a bone-chilling fear from Lin Yi. Even if he was lucky enough to escape today, he wouldn't be able to. He would probably be traumatized for the rest of his life. Neither retreat nor fight. Just what are these two doing? Seeing the two of them in a stalemate, the spectators below the stage could not help but frown. Only Kang Ming Ming and Lin Yi knew about the pillfire bomb. The spectators below the stage had no idea. They only saw that Lin Yi suddenly grabbed Kang Ming Ming's left hand, and then the two of them inexplicably stopped moving. They were looking forward to the fight between the two strong rookies, and both of them would be injured. Even if they did not directly kill each other, they would at least become disabled and never be able to rise again. But what was the current situation? Off. Nothing had been done yet. Kang Xiaoming's breath was coming out like a bellows. Amidst the panic and fear, he finally understood one thing: Lin Yi was playing with him for real. That's right. Lin Yi was indeed playing for real. He was well aware of the power of Kang Ming Ming's pillfire bomb. After all, his vital energy bomb was almost the same move. If it had exploded at such a close distance before, not only would Kang Ming Ming die, but he would also not be much better off. But now, after his strength had skyrocketed, Lin Yi was not so worried. Because his identity was very likely to have been seen through by Meng Jueguang, he was now very eager to try out his current strength out of consideration for the crisis. With his strength and vital energy body protection, Kang Ming Ming's pillfire bomb of this level would not cause a fatal threat. But to what extent the final protection was, it could be seen how strong he was. Finally, Kang Ming Ming could not bear the huge pressure that made people collapse. He took the initiative to beg for mercy. "Linny, oh no, boss Linny, I know you are powerful. Can you stop playing with me? As long as you let me go, I will admit defeat now. I will admit defeat immediately without any hesitation." "Let you go?" Linny raised his eyebrows and said with a playful smile, "What's in it for me? Anyway, as long as you die, your cave residence will naturally belong to me. What's in it for me to let you go? Oh yes, I heard that your cave residence is number 1 on the top of the mountain. It seems to be quite good. I'm interested in living there." "I will die, but won't you die? You lunatic, do you know how powerful the pillfire bomb in my hand is?" Kang Ming Ming was stimulated to the point of hysteria. There may be human beings who were not afraid of death, but Kang Ming Ming was definitely not one of them. He was not only afraid of death, but he was absolutely afraid of death. Otherwise, he would not have tried to find a way to hug someone's thigh. It was not easy to find a big tree like Su Lingchong. He thought that he could summon the wind and summon the rain on the Heaven Stage Island. If he was killed by Lin Yi at this time or even killed by his own pillfire bomb, then he would really have no place to cry. The words, "die with everlasting regret," were simply tailor-made for him. At this point, the people under the stage had already reacted. Although the words pillfire bomb were unfamiliar, it was associated with Kang Ming Ming's identity as an alchemist and his previous performance in the newcomer challenge. This trick was not difficult to understand. It was just that what the people under the stage could not understand was that Kang Ming Ming's trump card was not only unable to exert its power in front of Lin Yi this time, but it became a hot potato that he could not get rid of. He was forced into a situation where he could not get off the tiger by Lin Yi. For a time, everyone couldn't help but start to look at each other. Looking at the embarrassed appearance of Kang Ming Ming on the stage, and then looking at Lin Yi's calm expression, this was not the peak of the newcomer's showdown at all. Kang Ming Ming, the newcomer deacon who had always been swaggering, was not even worth a fart in front of Lin Yi. Kang Ming Ming desperately wanted to break free, but Lin Yi always had an unshakable expression. It seemed that the pillfire bomb that even Kang Ming Ming himself was afraid of was really not worth mentioning in his eyes. This kind of feeling, at most, was holding a small gun in his hand that could not even break a piece of skin, that was all. Chapter 3947. The difference in strength between him and Lin Yi was so huge that he couldn't see the end of it. It would be wishful thinking if he wanted to break free from Lin Yi's grasp. The only way was to chop off his left hand as mentioned earlier. Unfortunately, not only was Kang Ming Ming afraid of death, but he was also afraid of pain. He wouldn't be able to do such a manly thing even if he had the guts to do so. Kang Ming Ming couldn't break free no matter how hard he tried, and he didn't dare to cut off his own arm. Playing a little trick was completely useless. Seeing the Danfire bomb in his hand getting more and more violent, Kang Ming Ming's heart was in his throat. No longer caring about his face, Kang Ming Ming shouted, "I've lost. I surrender. I'll give up, okay?" He wasn't just shouting at Lin Yi. Judging from Lin Yi's attitude, Kang Ming Ming knew that even if he surrendered, Lin Yi might not give him the chance. Therefore he was shouting at the crowd, especially the pavilion master of Welcoming Pavilion, Hu Yunfeng. As soon as he said that, the crowd was in an uproar. Kang Ming Ming had purposely lowered his voice when he begged for mercy, so they couldn't hear it clearly. However, now that he shouted it in front of everyone, it was hard for them not to hear it clearly. Did I hear it wrong? Kang Ming Ming surrendered? The crowd looked at each other with a strange expression. They had expected that Kang Ming Ming was no match for Lin Yi. However, he was a newcomer that Su Lingchong and Pavilion Master Hu Yunfeng supported. Even if he didn't care about his own face, he should at least care about the faces of the people above him. Being forced by Lin Yi to surrender and beg for mercy in front of everyone was too embarrassing. The truth was that Pavilion Master Hu Yunfeng, who always paid attention to his image, had his face as black as the bottom of a pot. Wasn't Kang Ming Ming's words a slap to his face in front of everyone? Fortunately, Su Lingchong was not present. This young master had been busy competing with the South Heaven Gate for the position of the first senior brother supervisor of the Soaring Sky Pavilion. Recently, it had reached a crucial moment. That was why he didn't come over. Otherwise, if he was here and Kang Ming Ming dared to embarrass him like this, he would definitely be killed. Kang Ming Ming was not a fool. If young Master Su was here, he would probably have a different kind of righteous expression. But now, no matter how unhappy Hu Yunfeng was, as long as he shouted this in front of everyone, then Hu Yunfeng must come forward to protect him. Otherwise, it would be a serious dereliction of duty. As expected, Although Hu Yunfeng's face was dark after hearing Kang Mingming's plea, he still appeared on the arena in a flash and said in a clear voice, "In that case, this duel ends here. Lin Yi, you can let go now." After saying this, Hu Yunfeng's eyes stared deadly at Lin Yi. If Lin Yi made any strange movements that did not conform to the rules, he could take the opportunity to attack him. He wanted to vent the anger in his heart. However, Lin Yi only paused for a moment before he cooperated and let go. He said calmly, "Since Pavilion Master Hu has said so, then I will be merciful and let you go. In that case, I'll be merciful and let you go. However, whether you can survive or not will depend on your own luck." After saying this before the crowd could react, Lin Yi's figure suddenly retreated. At the same time, Hu Yunfeng's expression also changed. Without saying a word, he dashed off the arena. At this moment, there was only Kang Mingming left on the arena. At first, he thought that his plan had worked and he felt quite lucky. However, he soon realized that the pill-fire bomb in his hand was on the verge of exploding. After coming to his senses, Kang Mingming immediately swung his hand in horror, desperately trying to throw the pill-fire bomb out. Unfortunately, before he could completely let go, the pill-fire bomb had already exploded. Boom! The ground shook violently, and the expressions of the people below the arena changed dramatically. When the dust settled, the arena was astonishingly destroyed by more than half. The protection circle of the welcoming pavilion wasn't that high-leveled, but Lin Yi seemed to be the only one who'd been able to do something like this. Who would have thought that Kang Xiaoming, that spineless coward, would be such a tough character? With such power, it could only be defeated by a freak like Lin Yi. Otherwise, if it had been any other newcomer present, they would have died without any possibility of survival. This guy Kang Mingming really had some skills. What they did not know was that this time, in order to kill Lin Yi, Kang Mingming deliberately held back the pill-fire bomb for a long time. The power had reached the limit of what he could do. That was why even he himself could not control it. This time, the pill-fire bomb that he deliberately held back not only did not blow up Lin Yi, but also caused him to fall into it. Originally, thanks to the intervention of Pavilion Master Hu Yunfeng, although this time Kang Mingming was extremely thrilling, he still had the opportunity to throw out the pill-fire bomb in time and escape unscathed. Unfortunately, Lin Yi did not give him this opportunity at all. At the moment when he let go, he secretly inserted a stream of true qi into it. If he could still hold on until the pill-fire bomb was thrown out, then he would really be a living ghost. With great difficulty he escaped a disaster. In the end, he did not expect that in the end he was still played by Lin Yi. This time, Kang Mingming was really bloody unlucky. Like everyone else, Lin Yi stared at the situation on the arena. Now he also wanted to know one thing, whether Kang Mingming was dead or alive. Although with the comparison of their current strength, it was difficult for Kang Mingming to pose a real threat to him. But in view of all the past grievances, Lin Yi did not mind taking this opportunity to kill Kang Mingming. After a while, a sharp-eyed person in the audience discovered Kang Xiaoming in the ruins of the arena. His body was riddled with wounds. His skin and flesh were all red with patches of charred black. It was a sight that made one's hair stand on end. Hu Yunfeng's eyelids twitched. No matter how much Kang Mingming embarrassed him, he was, after all, a person who Su Lingchong had ordered to take good care of. If he let him die here, it would be difficult to explain to Su Lingchong later. With a flash, Hu Yunfeng appeared next to Kang Mingming. He carefully measured his breath and found that it was more exhaling than inhaling. It seemed that he was about to die. But fortunately he still had one last breath. Hu Yunfeng hesitated for a moment, then fiercely gritted his teeth. He took out a 4th-grade Great Recover pill from his bosom and fed it to Kang Mingming. Although the 4th-grade Great Recover pill was precious, if he could exchange it for Kang Mingming's life, not only would he be saving Kang Mingming's life, but the key was that at the same time, he could also make Su Lingchong owe him a favor. It was quite worthwhile. Chapter 3948. Even though Kang Mingming was not far from death, as long as he had the 4th-grade Great Revitalizing Pill to save his life, it was basically impossible for him to die. However, Lin Yi didn't have too many regrets. As far as he was concerned, if Kang Xiaoming died just like that, it would be great. But even if Kang Xiaoming didn't die, it wasn't a bad thing. He had previously diverted the Southern Sky Gate and Yujia's attention to Kang Mingming. He did not expect to deceive these people, but at least he could act as a smokescreen for a while. If he killed Kang Mingming this time, not only would Su Lingchong and the others seek revenge, it would also attract the attention of the Southern Sky Gate and Yuzha, who had been lying low for some reason. At that time, if Meng Jueguang were to appear in front of them again, Lin Yi's situation would not be far from collapsing. Therefore, in Lin Yi's eyes, Kang Ming's lucky survival was still of some use. As long as he continued to struggle at death's door, he could continue to confuse the Southern Sky Gate and Wuxia, so that they would not be driven to desperate measures for the Star Ink Stone. As long as he could temporarily stabilize these people before Meng Jueguang came into contact with them, Lin Yi still had a chance to resolve the hidden danger. Although he was not confident, he still had to try. After all, compared to the Southern Sky Gate and Wuxia, or even the stronger Southern Tyrant, Meng Jueguang was only a small problem. Lin Yi did not have the strength to face Southern Tyrant at the moment, but if he only needed to get rid of Meng Jueguang, he still had a chance, provided that he found a good opportunity. It didn't matter if Kang Xiaoming was dead or alive, there were pros and cons to it. That was the reason why Lin Yi's performance was so unpredictable. Otherwise, if he really made up his mind to kill Kang Ming, with Kang Ming's insignificant cultivation, he would have died long ago even if he had 10 lives. How could he have had the chance to linger until now? If he had used a true Qi bomb to fight with him, Kang Ming would have died very quickly. However, in that case Lin Yi would be exposed. After all, the 4th grade Great Recover Pill was a healing medicine that could save a life. Kang Ming was in such a miserable state because of his Danfire bomb, but he still managed to hang on to his last breath. Not only did his breathing gradually stabilize, but he also quickly regained consciousness. However, before he could rejoice that he had escaped with his life, Lin Yi's next words almost made him faint. Lin Yi cleared his throat and spoke to the crowd in a loud voice. According to the rules, the number 1 cave on top of the mountain now belongs to me. However, I have no interest in this cave. If anyone here wants it, just tell me. As long as the conditions are right, it won't be a problem for me to give it to anyone. As soon as he said that, the crowd was in an uproar. They thought that today was just a cross-pavilion challenge. No matter what, they had to rely on their own strength to fight for it. They didn't expect that there would be such benefits. The number 1 cave on top of the mountain. There was no doubt that this was the best cave that a newcomer could get. There was still more than half a year before the 1-year period for newcomers. Putting aside the risk of being isolated and targeted, for all the newcomers present, this was still very tempting. Especially those newcomers who had not yet succeeded in building their foundation. In the end, they might only be one step away. If they could exchange for the number 1 cave on top of the mountain by paying some price, even if the price was not small, in their opinion it was still very worthwhile. Of course, even if the newcomers of Mysterious Pavilion and Blue Cloud Pavilion had such thoughts, it was difficult for them to meet Lin Yi's requirements. Moreover, there was the risk of being targeted collectively. However, the newcomers of Soaring Sky Pavilion did not have such concerns. After listening to Lin Yi's words, their eyes lit up. Among them, there were many people who did not buy Kang Ming's words. It was only because of Su Lingchong that they did not dare to openly oppose him. Even if there was an occasional bold one, they would follow Shi Yuda's footsteps and be tricked by Kang Ming. However, right now their opportunity had come. As long as they occupied the number 1 cave on top of the mountain, in a sense, it was equivalent to replacing Kang Ming. Moreover, they did not need to offend Su Lingchong. They just needed to pay a small price and exchange it with Lin Yi, an unrelated outsider. At that time, even if Su Lingchong wanted to blame someone, there was no reason for him to blame them. For a moment, all the newcomers of Soaring Sky Pavilion were eager to give it a try. They had completely forgotten about the Interpavilion challenge. When Kang Ming saw this situation, his eyes rolled back and he fainted on the spot. Relying on the care of Su Lingchong and Pavilion Master Hu Yunfeng, it took him a long time to establish a certain status in front of the newcomers of Soaring Sky Pavilion. In the end, with a simple sentence from Lin Yi, all his efforts were wasted. It would be strange if he did not faint from anger. Hu Yunfeng could not help but frown. He was quite dissatisfied with Lin Yi's way of doing things. Although the welcoming pavilion did allow newcomers to exchange cave residences, it was still a private matter. Lin Yi was so brazen. Where was his dignity as a pavilion master? Lin Yi, wait a minute. This interpavilion challenge is indeed your win, but our welcoming pavilion has always been particular about benevolence. Even if you want to occupy the number 1 cave on top of the mountain, you have to at least wait until Deacon Kong recovers. Hu Yunfeng pretended to be benevolent. Wait until he recovers? If he can't recover for the rest of his life, wouldn't this interpavilion challenge be a joke? Pavilion Master Hu, don't you think that's inappropriate? Lin Yi replied with a sneer. Everyone present was also discussing. Hu Yunfeng's favoritism was indeed too obvious. What's more, many people were waiting to exchange cave residences with Lin Yi. This involved their personal interests, so they were naturally dissatisfied. Hu Yunfeng saw that the situation was a little bad. He would not do such a stupid thing to provoke public anger for Kang Mingming. He could only soften his attitude and take a step back. In any case, with Deacon Kang's current condition, it would be too disappointing to let him move out directly. How about this? Give him 10 days. After 10 days, I will let you deal with the number 1 cave on top of the mountain. How about it? Okay, this is what Pavilion Master Hu said. Lin Yi smiled faintly. For him, the number 1 cave on top of the mountain was not attractive at all. Being able to use it as bait to pit Kang Mingming against the other newcomers of Soaring Sky Pavilion was already a good deal. As for the 10 days, it did not matter much. Chapter 39-49. In the end, the interpavilion battle ended hastily. Such an outcome was unexpected, but it was reasonable. After all, not everyone had the heaven-defying strength of Lin Yi, who could easily crush the second and third generation of the Soaring Sky Pavilion without any effort. After that, Lin Yi's actions and Kang Mingming's tragic end, especially the future ownership of the cave abode at the top of the mountain, inevitably became the focus of discussion among the newcomers. Lin Yi did not care about it. He continued to cultivate as usual every day, but in private he gave Li Jingming an order to find a way to monitor Meng Jueguang's recent actions. Because of their identities, Lin Yi basically had no possibility of fighting Meng Jueguang openly. To nip the threat in the bud, the only way left for him was to take the risk and assassinate Meng Jueguang. The risk of this was obvious. He had to find the perfect opportunity to take action, and he had to hit the target in one strike. If any accident happened, it was very likely to lead to disaster. After all, this was different from the last time he dealt with Nan Tianyong. Last time he was Lin Er, a rogue cultivator whose background no one could find out. But this time it was Meng Jueguang. If the law enforcement hall was involved, it was almost certain that he would be found out. Once he was suspected, it would be a piece of cake for the law enforcement hall to find out what was going to happen to him. One could only imagine what would happen to him. Therefore Lin Yi had to keep his cool. Knowing that time was not in his favor, he had to take out the patience of an assassin and wait for an opportunity. However, to his disappointment, after the interpavilion battle, Li Jingming tried his best to monitor Meng Jueguang for 5 days, but he could not find any opportunity to take action. Basically, Meng Jueguang was not alone outside, and when he was alone, it was often in his own welcoming pavilion territory. None of them were good opportunities. Just when Lin Yi thought that he would have to continue waiting for such a long time and prepare for a protracted battle, a note suddenly appeared at the door of his cave residence. Lin Er, see you at noon today at the 10th mining area. Although there was no signature, the person who wrote this note was undoubtedly Meng Jueguang. Are you finally ready to lay your cards on the table? Lin Yi rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Even if the other party didn't say what the consequences would be if he didn't go, even if he used his toes to think, he could imagine what awaited him when the time came. His identity would definitely be exposed and he would die a tragic death. After thinking about it carefully for a moment, Lin Yi finally decided to go. This was a choice, he had no other choice. After all, the initiative was still in the hands of the other party, and he had no choice but to be led by the nose. Moreover, if he made good use of this opportunity, it might be a rare opportunity. How could Lin Yi miss it so easily? After tidying up his mind and adjusting his state of mind, Lin Yi immediately walked towards Jade Spirit Hall after making his decision. Although there was still a lot of time before noon, it was not a bad thing to arrive early for this kind of thing. Coming to Jade Spirit Hall, Lin Yi walked towards the 10th mining area with familiarity. It had been a while since he came here. Although the 3-month period for the first batch of newcomers to sign contracts had passed, this did not mean that they could not come to Jade Spirit Hall to mine after the expiration. The 3-month period was equivalent to a probation period, and as long as the newcomers performed well during this period, they could freely arrange their time to enter and exit Jade Spirit Hall to mine. Henceforth, they could freely arrange their time to enter and exit the Spirit Jade Hall to mine. As for those who were tired, they politely declined. Walking in the familiar tunnel of the 10th mining area, Lin Yi could not help but secretly speculate. What was Meng Jueguang's intention of deliberately inviting him to this place? The characteristic of the 10th mining area was that there were few people. Apart from the usual 2 guards, there was no one else in the huge mining area. But so what? After all, the existence of the 2 guards was still a big problem. It was simply unrealistic to want to do something that could not be seen in the light under their eyes. If they attacked the two guards, then the matter would be blown out of proportion. At that time, no one would be able to escape responsibility. Or this was Meng Jueguang's intention. He wanted to find a place with few people to threaten him, but at the same time he did not dare to find a completely empty place to avoid being killed by him. Lin Yi secretly clenched his fists. No matter what Meng Jueguang was planning, he must put an end to this matter today. Otherwise, if the other really took advantage of him, he would never have a day of peace in the future. Success or failure depended on this one move. Entering the 10th mining area, which he had not seen for a long time, Lin Yi felt as if it was a lifetime ago. Under the eyes of the two guards, he looked around the mining area, but did not find anything unusual. This result was not unexpected. This was a mining area after all, and there were guards watching at all times. Even with Meng Jueguang's connections, it would not be easy for him to do anything here. But even so, this guy still called him here. Did he really think that he could get rid of him just because he had a handle on his identity? Suppressing the doubts in his heart, Lin Yi immediately began to mine as if nothing had happened. Although Meng Jueguang was a big trouble, and he must be eliminated quickly this time. But the more it was so, the more he needed to stabilize his mind. Even if it was purely for the consideration of confusing the enemy, he could not show too much abnormality. Just like that, he waited until noon, and Meng Jueguang's figure finally appeared from the depths of the mining tunnel. As soon as he walked into the 10th mining area, he caught a glimpse of Lin Yi's back from afar. Meng Jueguang's heart was suddenly filled with joy. As long as this guy appeared here, it meant that the fact that he was Lin Yi II was already set in stone. Otherwise, there was no need for him to keep the appointment at all. However, when he looked again, Meng Jueguang could not help but feel a little more doubtful. Lin Yi was mining in full swing at the moment. It did not look like he was here to keep the appointment at all. If it was any other normal person, if their identity was in the hands of someone else, they would not say panic but at least feel uneasy. At such a critical time, who would be in the mood to mine? Could it be that this guy was pretending? Meng Jueguang could not help but mutter in his heart. But if he wanted to fool me with such a small trick, he was looking down on me too much. Glancing at the two guards next to him, Meng Jueguang immediately walked behind Lin Yi, who was busy mining. He applauded and ridiculed, "Young hero Lin, you are indeed a mining expert who has repeatedly created miracles. Your actions and efficiency tsk, you can be a model." Chapter 3950. At this point you still don't give up and still want to continue pretending. Your acting is not bad, but it's a pity that it's all in vain in front of me. Meng Jueguang curled his lips in disdain, then he said with a ferocious face, "I say, are you sick of pretending? Young hero Lin, or should I say you prefer another name, Linaire?" Lin Yi was still indifferent and continued to mine without saying a word. Although at this point he couldn't hide anything by remaining silent, but he wanted to see what kind of evidence Meng Jueguang had in his hands. "Humph, you still think you can continue to deceive everyone? You really won't shed tears until you see the coffin. Fine, I'll be merciful and show you something to destroy this unrealistic fantasy of yours." Meng Jueguang snorted coldly, then he took out something from his arms. It was the spiritual jade that he exchanged from the stall owner in the market last time. Glancing at this spiritual jade that had some flaws, Lin Yi's eyelids couldn't help but twitch. Then he suddenly realized that no wonder Meng Jueguang was so sure. He really found a fatal flaw. For this spiritual jade, because there were some flaws on it, although Lin Yi didn't pay special attention to it, he still had some impression of it. At that time he didn't pay much attention to it. After all, it was impossible for him to guess that this spiritual jade was personally marked by Meng Jueguang. And after the transaction, the probability of it falling into the hands of the original owner could be said to be very small. Even if such a small probability event really happened in theory, it wouldn't pose any threat to Lin Yi. But he didn't expect that there would be such a coincidence in the world. Obviously he had been extremely careful in everything he did, but because of this negligence that couldn't even be called negligence, he was caught by Meng Jueguang. In this regard, Lin Yi could only laugh bitterly in his heart. The affairs of the world are truly unpredictable. Meng Jueguang smiled proudly after noticing Lin Yi's expression. "Yo, looks like young hero Lin has finally come to terms with reality. Say, if I give this to the Southern Sky Gate, what will happen if I explain the cause and effect to them?" "What do you want?" Lin Yi finally spoke. Now that things had developed to this point, it was completely impossible to rely on sophistry to get away with it. He could only face it head-on. TSK, what a scary look. Young hero Lin is a cornered dog that will do something desperate. Are you planning to kill me to silence me? Meng Jueguang pretended to be alarmed and patted his chest. With an unpredictable tone he said, speaking of which, young hero Lin is really an amazing person. As a newcomer from the secular world, you have such powerful strength. So powerful that you can even kill a peak late-stage foundation establishment expert like Nan Tianyong? I, Meng Jueguang, am probably just a reckless clown in your eyes, right? Although these words were said in a strange tone. But in reality, after discovering Lin Yi's identity, Meng Jueguang was indeed frightened to the point that his hair stood on end. He was literally drenched in cold sweat. No matter what, the fact that Lin Yi was able to kill Nan Tianyong was simply too shocking. It was simply too horrifying. Even a peak late stage of the foundation establishment realm could be killed in one move. Didn't that mean that Meng Jueguang, a mere mid-stage of the foundation establishment realm, wasn't even worthy of Lin Yi's attention? He had always thought that Lin Yi was just SOSO. Even if he could repeatedly defeat Meng Tong and even Murong Zhen, he was still in the category of newcomers. If he could fight personally, even if there were 100 Lin Yi, he would have long been dead. Now that he thought about it, the idea was laughable. It was fortunate that Lin Yi didn't have the chance to fight him. Otherwise, with all the things he'd done before, if he'd given Lin Yi even the slightest chance, Lin Yi would have been dead by now. Do you really want to kill me in one move? So that you can avoid future troubles? Meng Jueguang's face was full of ridicule. He pointed at the two guards in the distance with his mouth and sneered fearlessly. Unfortunately, although this place is a dead mining area, the number of guards is never less than 2. Even if I'm not your opponent, can you deal with these 2 guards at the same time? Besides, even if you can kill these 2 guards at the same time, do you have the confidence to escape the joint pursuit of Spirit Jade Hall and Law Enforcement Hall, young hero Lin? Hearing this, Lin Yi smiled non-committally and shook his head. So much nonsense and beating around the bush. Are you really that afraid of me, senior brother Meng? Afraid? Of course I'm afraid. I'm scared to death of you right now. Meng Jueguang deliberately put on an expression of extreme fear. Then his expression changed again. He picked up the spiritual jade that was used to threaten Lin Yi and snorted coldly. But young hero Lin, there's one thing I advise you not to misunderstand. I'm not afraid that you'll kill me, but I'm afraid that you won't be able to give me what I want and force me to look for Southern Heavenly Gate. That would be too disappointing, wouldn't it? Sure enough, a troublesome fellow. Lin Yi lightly exhaled and said indifferently, tell me, what is it that you want? Not bad, not bad. Looks like young hero Lin is quite sensible. This is for the best. Otherwise it won't look good on everyone's faces. What I want is very simple. I believe young hero Lin will definitely satisfy me, right? Meng Jueguang once again tossed the spiritual jade in his hand. You want spiritual jade? How much? Lin Yi raised his eyebrows. If Meng Jueguang's appetite was limited to spiritual jade, then it wouldn't be a problem. He could get some spiritual jade to temporarily calm Meng Jueguang down and then find a chance to get rid of him. That would be a good plan. Unexpectedly, Meng Jueguang suddenly burst out laughing. Seeing that he had attracted the attention of the 2 guards, he lowered his voice again and said, You dare to ask me how much I want? Young hero Lin, are you joking? If a pile of gold or a chicken that lays golden eggs were placed in front of you, which would you choose? I see. Lin Yi finally understood. As expected, with Meng Jueguang's greedy nature, he wouldn't be satisfied with a mere spiritual jade. This guy could deduce that Lin Yi had a way to recharge the jade, so it wasn't surprising that he had his eyes on it. A chicken that lays golden eggs? What do you mean? Lin Yi pretended to be confused. No matter what, there was no way he would let anyone know about the space in the jade pendant, which was related to his life. I just praised you for being sensible and now you're pretending. Young hero Lin, is it really okay for you to not cooperate? My temper may not be as good as you think. If you make me unhappy, I might sell you out to the Southern Sky Gate. I'm sure they won't mistreat me. What do you say, young hero Lin? Meng Jueguang threatened with an unfriendly expression. Chapter 3951. Meng Jueguang, who originally had the absolute initiative and was confident that he could toy with Lin Yi in the palm of his hand, was stunned by Lin Yi's gaze. He subconsciously took a step back in fright. After a moment, Meng Jueguang came to his senses and said with a cold expression, It's useless to quibble. The ironclad evidence is right here. You must have a way to quickly recharge the waste jade. You only have 2 choices now. One is to tell me about it. This is good for both of us. As for the second, I don't think I need to explain the consequences when the time comes. Lin Yi was silent for a moment, then finally opened his mouth and said, "Do you really want to know about the method to recharge waste jade into good jade?" "Nonsense. If it wasn't for this, do you think you would still be alive today? These people from the southern heavenly gate would have gotten rid of you long ago, young hero Lin." Meng Jueguang sneered. "Fine, I can tell you about this. But after that, how can I guarantee that you won't kill me after I've outlived my usefulness?" Lin Yi said in an unpredictable tone. From his point of view, it was normal for him to not trust Meng Jueguang. Meng Jueguang was not surprised at all. He immediately sneered and said, "Young hero Lin, I thought you were very smart. I didn't expect that when it comes to the critical moment, you're no different from a stupid ordinary person. Just think about it. If I expose you, I won't be able to keep this secret. What good would that do me? With such a heaven-defying method, of course, I should leave one person alive to make a fortune." These words were not empty words. Looking at the entire heavenly stage island, although many forces had mastered the method to recharge waste jade, they were all similar to the spirit jade hall. They needed to spend hundreds of years to do so. In contrast, if Lin Yi really had mastered the method to quickly recharge waste jade, then the degree of heaven-defying would be absolutely shocking. Even if it was for his own benefit, Meng Jueguang would never let a third person know. After all, to him, that was 100 disadvantages. There was no advantage to it. "All right, as long as you understand." Lin Yi nodded. He then pointed at the two guards in the distance and said indifferently, "What about those two? Don't you need to think of a way to get rid of them? If they accidentally hear or see us, it will be very bad." Meng Jueguang was stunned, but he quickly understood Lin Yi's intentions. He snorted and said, "Young hero Lin, I advise you not to waste your efforts. You want to send those two guards away and then take the opportunity to attack me? What wishful thinking." Meng Jueguang was not an idiot. In this kind of situation, what he needed to avoid the most was to be alone with Lin Yi. Based on the difference in their strength, if Lin Yi wanted to kill him, it would be no different from killing a chicken. After all, he was a ferocious character who could even kill an expert at the peak of the late stage of the Foundation establishment realm in a second. At this distance, as long as I keep my voice down, they won't be able to hear me. I will specially release a Jinshi barrier to block them off. Moreover, if my guess is not wrong, your secret to quickly recharging waste jade should be hidden in my number 10. You've done it so many times under their noses without being discovered, so there shouldn't be any problems now. So don't try to play any tricks. Do you understand what I mean, young hero Lin?" Meng Jueguang warned with an unfriendly expression. Little did he know that his speculation and threat, which he thought was smart, provided Lin Yi with ideas and clues. Without his words, it would have been very troublesome to fabricate a decent lie. However, now that he had Meng Jueguang's presumptuous speculation as a reference, it would be much easier to deceive him. Lin Yi's eyes lit up when he heard that. His mind raced. If that was the case, it might be a rare opportunity if he made good use of it. Well, since it has come to this, I won't hide it anymore. You guessed it right. The secret to turning waste jades into good jades lies in my number 10. It's also because of this that I was able to dig up good jades here. Lin Yi's expression was mixed with a trace of helplessness. The more helpless Lin Yi was, the happier Meng Jueguang felt. He would not be on guard, and the easier it was for the lie to come true in his eyes. It's just as I expected. No wonder in this dead mining area no one, including us, can dig up good jades, but only you can. I said there must be something fishy about it. Meng Jueguang's face was full of foresight. In retrospect, because Lin Yi kept digging up good jades here, he and Meng Tong had racked their brains and wasted a lot of energy in this place. In the end, they were still rebuffed and finally had to give up. However, according to what Lin Yi said, if they had persisted for a while, they might have found out the secret long ago. They wouldn't have waited until now. Meng Jueguang secretly regretted it for a while. Then he impatiently urged, "Tell me, what is the secret?" "The secret is very simple. In this dead mining area number 10, there is a super spiritual eye. The concentration of spiritual chi is beyond imagination. Any piece of waste jade can be quickly charged up in a short period of time and become a good jade with abundant spiritual chi." Lin Yi organized his story in a short period of time. Super spiritual eye? Although Meng Jueguang had guessed it long ago, he still felt it was a little unbelievable after hearing Lin Yi's words. He said in disbelief, "Is this really possible? Even if something like the super spiritual eye really exists, why would it appear in this dead mining area? Then why is there only waste jade here and not a single good jade can be dug out? Lin Yi shook his head and said indifferently, "Don't misunderstand. The super spiritual eye that I'm talking about doesn't always exist. It only appears at certain times. Moreover, it moves. It could be here one moment, but the next moment, it could escape to some unknown place. Could even disappear. It's not impossible." So troublesome? Meng Jueguang couldn't help but frown. Lin Yi's story sounded unimaginable at first. However, when he thought about it carefully, it was quite plausible. Even an astute person like him wouldn't be able to tell that it was fake in a short period of time. However, this situation was a little different from what he had expected. The super spiritual eye was very small, and it could change and move at any time. This meant that there were various restrictions when it came to operating it. It was slightly unrealistic to want to use it to quickly fish out a large amount of spiritual jades. However, even if the operation was a little complicated and troublesome, as long as he could quickly turn waste jade into good jade, then it wouldn't be a big problem. In the end, there was still a way to make a fortune. At most, it would just take a little more time. Chapter 3952. About this, because the range of the super spiritual eye is very small, I can only find it if I use my chi to sense it. I'll say the ugly words first, this still depends on luck. As he spoke, Lin Yi looked at Meng Jueguang indifferently without any signs of lying. Depends on luck? What you're saying is, if I can't find the super spiritual eye, then it's my bad luck and it has nothing to do with you. Meng Jueguang laughed coldly and said with a sinister face, "What a pity, young hero Lin, your little tricks are useless in front of me. I have to tell you a piece of bad news, you have to find the super spiritual eye by today or else what?" Lin Yi asked indifferently. "Then you can only blame your bad luck. At that time, I will have a reason to think that the super spiritual eye is a lie you made up to fool me, and the consequences will be very serious. What do you say, young hero Lin?" Meng Jueguang threatened with a sinister smile. On this point, Meng Jueguang was still very clever. Before seeing the actual results, if Lin Yi thought that he could get away with a lie he made up at the last minute, then he would be gravely mistaken. For this kind of thing, one would not release the eagle without seeing the rabbit. That was the logic and awareness that a smart person should have. Okay. Lin Yi looked deeply at Meng Jueguang and then stopped mining. He placed his hand on the stone wall, and then continuously poured qi into it. Seeing this, Meng Jueguang could not help but believe it a little. This action was very similar to what Lin Yi said, using qi to search for the super spiritual eye. However, this kind of stupid method, even without trying it, could be seen that it was very strenuous. Luckily, there was Lin Yi, this free labor. Meng Jueguang felt that if he were to do it himself, not to mention whether or not he could successfully find the super spiritual eye, he would definitely waste all his qi. He was not like Lin Yi who could replenish his true qi at any time. If he used up all his true qi, he did not know how long it would take to recover it. Just thinking about it made him feel bitter. Seeing Lin Yi's hand on the stone wall for a long time without any movement, Meng Jueguang could not help but frown and say, "Hey, can you do it or not? Don't think that you can bluff your way out of this. If you can't find the super spiritual eye, I guarantee that you will die a miserable death." Lin Yi turned his head to look at him and said indifferently, "Although the concentration of the spiritual qi in the super spirit eye is very obvious, the range is extremely small, and the changes are rapid. Even I would find it hard to find it in a short period of time. If you don't even have this bit of patience, you should give up as soon as possible." After saying that, Lin Yi turned around and moved to another place, continuing his previous actions. "TSK, you have a way with words. But it's fine, haste makes waste. Anyway, I will only give you half a day's time. If you still can't find the super spiritual eye by the end of the day, you can just wait to die a miserable death." Meng Jueguang said with a sinister smile, and then no longer said anything. He just stood behind Lin Yi and looked at him coldly. Lin Yi could not help but secretly smile when he heard that. "Still want to wait until the end of the day? Don't worry, you won't be able to live until then." The two guards looked at Lin Yi and Meng Jueguang's strange actions from afar, and could not help but look at each other in dismay. Coming to this kind of place and not mining, but randomly touching the stone wall, what kind of situation was this? If it was someone else who was so lazy, the two guards would have already stepped forward to reprimand him. But this time they chose to turn a blind eye. After all, Meng Jueguang had always been popular in the Spirit Jade Hall, and the two of them were just ordinary guards. There was no need to offend Meng Jueguang for such a small matter and find trouble for themselves. Moreover, Lin Yi had worked here for more than 3 months and had a good relationship with them. Naturally, they would not come forward to make things difficult for them. The two guards turned a blind eye, and Lin Yi and Meng Jueguang were also happy to do so. For the two of them, it was the best that the two guards could be so tactful and not cause trouble. Time passed by bit, and a full 6 hours had passed from noon. The sky outside was getting dark and the time to end the day was getting closer and closer. At this time, Lin Yi had almost walked around the entire 10th mining area. There were already more than 20 places where he had stopped. To be precise, there were 22. Hey, I have to remind you that the work is going to end soon. Although I personally do not like this result, but it seems that we are destined not to cooperate well. This is the will of heaven. Meng Jueguang said with a face of impatience. After holding back for a whole afternoon, his patience had been completely worn out. Lin Yi still silently put his hand on the stone wall, and continued to instill genuine qi. This was the 23rd and also the last one in his plan. To be honest, for a newcomer like you who is so excellent that it is almost legendary, I originally wanted to take this opportunity to cooperate with you from now on. It is really a pity. Meng Jueguang suddenly sighed. What he said was indeed from the bottom of his heart. After all, he was about to be promoted to the position of 3rd Pavilion Master, but he did not even have a capable subordinate. If this were to spread, it would be too shameful. Although Meng Tong had been reborn after taking the Meridian Heart-Shattering Pill, and seemed to have become slightly more reliable compared to the helpless Ado in the past, it was a pity that he was still far from being a match for Lin Yi. Now he was beaten half to death and could not get out of bed. As for Murong Zhen, compared to Meng Tong, she was indeed much more reliable, but this woman was very scheming. Even if she slept with him, she would not be of the same mind as Meng Jueguang. She was like a poisonous snake who could show its ferocious fangs at any time. Neither of these two people were people that Meng Jueguang could truly rely on. Now that he had this perfect opportunity, if he could subdue Lin Yi, it would be ideal for him. Not to mention that his strength was far above those two people because he had a fatal weakness in his hands. He did not have to worry about his loyalty. He was practically a puppet that was tailor-made for Meng Jueguang. The stronger Lin Yi was, the happier he would be. Unfortunately, compared to a puppet subordinate, Meng Jueguang cared more about spiritual jades. If Lin Yi could not truthfully reveal the secret of how waste jades could quickly become good jades, then he could only choose to kill him. Hearing this, Lin Yi retracted his hand. Everything was ready. He smiled playfully and said, "Is that so? That's a pity. If you had said so earlier, you might have had a slight chance to keep your life." What? Meng Jueguang was instantly stunned. From Lin Yi's strange words, he felt an unusual sense of danger. Chapter 3953. Nothing. Lin Yi shook his head lightly, then squinted his eyes and said, "If you have any last words, Senior Brother Meng can stay. Although you and I are not the same kind of people, no matter what, we are still brothers in the same pavilion. I can still help you with this little bit of help." What the fuck are you talking about? Meng Jueguang suddenly felt guilty. Even if he held Lin Yi's fatal weakness in his hands because of the difference in strength, the weak would naturally be afraid of the strong. This was innate and inevitable. Strictly speaking, he, Meng Jueguang and Lin Yi were both masters in the middle stage of the Foundation establishment realm, so it was not certain that he would not have the power to fight. It was a pity that Lin Yi once had the magnificent feat of killing Nan Tianyong, a master at the peak of the late stage of the Foundation establishment realm. In the eyes of any normal person, including Meng Jueguang himself, they would not think that they could fight with such an abnormal monster. It was no different from sending themselves to death. The intention of Lin Yi's words could not be more obvious. Feeling the waves of killing intent emitted from his body, Meng Jueguang could not help but feel creeped out. He said in horror, "You actually want to kill me? Are you crazy? You actually want to kill me in such a place? Do you think you don't have to die?" Meng Jueguang had already considered the possibility of Lin Yi taking the risk to kill him, but in his opinion, this possibility was very small. Lin Yi was such a promising and intelligent newcomer. As long as he was not forced into a dead end, as long as there was a chance of turning around, he would never take the risk. Although there were few people on this occasion, there were still two guards watching from a distance. If Lin Yi dared to make a move, it would be equivalent to smashing a jar. No matter whether he could successfully kill Meng Jueguang or not, at least he would definitely die, and it would definitely be a very tragic death. No matter how strong Lin Yi was, he was just a newcomer. In front of leviathans like the Law Enforcement Hall and Spirit Jade Hall, as well as the three great pavilions, it was not worth mentioning at all. However, Lin Yi smiled indifferently. He turned around and said, "Under normal circumstances, it is indeed not convenient to kill you, but if you died in a mine accident, there should be no problem." Mine disaster? Meng Jueguang was startled, but before he could react, Lin Yi was already walking towards the tunnel of the mining area with the spiritual jade basket in his hand, looking like he was ready to hand over the work. In an instant, Meng Jueguang was so scared that he broke out in a cold sweat. If what Lin Yi said was true, that he was not killed by Lin Yi but died in a mine accident, then even if he died it would be in vain and no one would associate it with Lin Yi. However, immediately Meng Jueguang suddenly laughed hysterically, pointing at Lin Yi's back and mocking, "Your wish is very wonderful, but unfortunately, a mine accident will not happen for hundreds of years. Placing your hope on such an unrealistic thing, should I say that young hero Lin is stupid, or have you reached a dead end? Mine accidents may be very common in the secular world. But in this Heaven Stage Island, especially in the mining area directly under the jurisdiction of the three great pavilions, Spirit Jade Hall, under the careful protection of all kinds of formations, the probability of a mine accident was as small as Meng Jueguang said. In fact, in the past 100 years, there was no record of any mine accident under the jurisdiction of Spirit Jade Hall. Generally speaking, because every mining area was guarded, if there was even a little bit of abnormality, it would be discovered and repaired very quickly. The Spirit Jade Hall attached great importance to this matter. And taking a step back, even if a mine accident really did happen, if it was of a normal degree for a master in the middle stage of the foundational level like Meng Jueguang, it would not be life-threatening. Unless it was a legendary nightmarish mine collapse. Of course, something like a mine collapse might not even happen once in 1,000 years, so there was no need to consider it. Therefore, after being scared out of his wits, Meng Jueguang quickly regained his composure. A mine accident was simply nonsense. Hearing this, Lin Yi's footsteps paused and he looked back at him. Desperate? After all, you know too much. If I don't bury you here today, it will be very troublesome for me. Meng Jueguang was startled. Just as he was about to open his mouth to ridicule, his face suddenly changed. In the cave wall behind him, suddenly began to tremble violently, and then a crack appeared. A trace of domineering qi emerged from it. How is this possible? What the hell is this guy doing? Meng Jueguang was suddenly horrified. Before, he could still listen to the mine accident mentioned by Lin Yi as a joke, but now even cracks began to appear on the heavily guarded cave wall. The mine accident had become a reality. After realizing that something was wrong, Meng Jueguang did not hesitate to turn around and run. Although with his strength in the middle stage of the foundational level, he had the confidence to deal with a normal mine accident, but if there was a chance, it was better to run away quickly. What's more, no matter how unbelievable it was, this mining disaster was most likely Lin Yi's doing. This was something that could be figured out even with his toes. If he let his guard down, he might fail miserably in an easy task. Meng Jueguang's reaction was extremely fast. However, before he could run more than a few steps, the cave wall behind him suddenly exploded. At the same time, the other 22 points that Lin Yi had checked exploded at the same time. Boom. The layers of protective formations in the mine collapsed in an instant, and the huge mine number 10 suddenly collapsed. Countless pieces of rubble, some of which were even mixed with a lot of spirit jades, were sent flying everywhere. Even the roof of the cave began to collapse with a loud rumble. It was a horrifying scene of doomsday. As expected, 23 true chi bombs exploding at the same time is enough to create a man-made mine accident. Lin Yi looked back at the scene and nodded to himself. In the afternoon, for more than 6 hours, under the name of investigating the super-spiritual eyes, he had planted 23 true chi bombs in the cave wall under Meng Jueguang's nose. As long as he controlled them to explode at the same time, it was possible to create a man-made mine accident, and then he could bury Meng Jueguang here. This was Lin Yi's plan. He did not know how much power was needed to penetrate the various protective formations here, so he spent so much time and exerted the power he could control to the limit. Chapter 3954. This was the best opportunity to bury Meng Jueguang, and it was also the only opportunity. Once it failed, there would not be such an opportunity in the future. Meng Jueguang would definitely contact the Southern Sky Gate in desperation, and the consequences would be unimaginable. Therefore, in order to ensure that nothing went wrong this time, Lin Yi had to go all out. If possible, let alone 23 vital chi bombs, even 230 vital chi bombs would not be a problem. However, judging from the current situation, the power of the 23 vital chi bombs had not only successfully triggered the expected mine disaster, but it was also more than enough. It could even be said that the power was too much, far beyond Lin Yi's imagination. In the midst of the chaos, Lin Yi suddenly noticed a piece of spiritual jade bursting out from the side, forcibly penetrating the 5-meter-thick stone pillar of the mine. Its terrifying penetrative power and lethality really made one's scalp tingle. The spiritual jade was very hard, far harder than ordinary rocks. It might not be a problem in normal times, but at this moment, it was undoubtedly a deadly weapon. The spirit chi in the mining area was rich to begin with. Even in the number 10 dead mining area, there were countless spiritual jades buried deep behind the stone walls, so there was no doubt that the spirit chi was also rich. In this enclosed space with rich spirit chi, it was simply a natural super-large spirit chi bomb. Judging from the signs under the guidance of Lin Yi's 23 vital chi bombs, this super-large spiritual chi bomb was already showing signs of exploding. Once it really developed to this stage, the spiritual chi in the mine would explode, and after obtaining unparalleled speed, together with its hardness and penetrative power, then every piece of spiritual jade here would be a great killing weapon. Even a golden core stage expert would not be able to escape unscathed. Lin Yi was suddenly shocked. He had no time to think further. Out of a subconscious self-protection reaction, he directly spurted vital chi from his whole body, and with an astonishing speed that exceeded his limit. His body shot toward the tunnel of the mining area like a cannonball. At this moment, Meng Jueguang was also struggling with all his might. However, because his position was much closer to the cave wall than Lin Yi's and his speed was much slower than Lin Yi's, he was swallowed by the rubble in the blink of an eye. According to Lin Yi's original plan, the power of the mine disaster alone might not be enough to bury Meng Jueguang, so the mine disaster was just a pretext. He intended to take advantage of the chaos to kill Meng Jueguang. Anyway, there were only 2 guards and he only needed to act fast enough in the chaos. It was not difficult to do this without anyone noticing. However, there was no longer a need for that. Judging from the current situation, if he did not flee with all his might, even Lin Yi would be buried here. Ever since the first spiritual jade was shot, the situation had gone far beyond his control. Damn it! I still have to take over as the 3rd pavilion master. How can I die in such a godforsaken place? In the rubble, Meng Jueguang's eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. His whole body was drenched in blood. He roared and desperately tried to chase after Lin Yi. Unfortunately, before he could finish his words, a piece of spiritual jade suddenly penetrated his chest from behind and pierced through his heart without any suspense. In an instant, Meng Jueguang had no heartbeat. To be precise, he had no heart. Immediately afterward, countless rubble, mixed with the daunting spiritual jades, whistled through his body from various parts. Meng Jueguang was instantly torn into pieces, and he could not be more dead. With his identity as the eldest senior brother in charge of the new disciples of Blue Cloud Pavilion, he was able to weave a huge network of connections and even forced away the 3rd pavilion master, Lu Bianren, and replaced him. Meng Jueguang, who was omnipotent in the eyes of the new disciples, died a violent death. He had worked so hard for so long, and the thing that he dreamed of was within his reach, but in the end he could not take over the position of the 3rd pavilion master. Meng Jueguang, who was engulfed by the rubble, could not close his eyes in the end. His blank and lifeless eyes were filled with resentment and unwillingness, and he died with everlasting regret. Phew. Lin Yi noticed this scene from the corner of his eye, and he immediately let out a long breath. Although things had progressed beyond his expectations, as long as he could successfully bury Meng Jueguang here, everything would be fine. After all, this guy knew about the flaw in his identity, and he had solid evidence in his hands. The threat was too great and he had to die. However, just when Lin Yi slightly relaxed, a huge force came from behind him. Even though he was wrapped in a super strong protective chi, he could not help but spit out a big mouthful of blood under the huge force. Lin Yi glanced behind him and he felt lucky. This time he was hit by a stone slab. If it was a more penetrating stone or a more terrifying spiritual jades, he would have been half crippled even if he did not die. Although the impact of the stone slab had caused Lin Yi to suffer serious injuries, there was one good thing about it. It increased his escape speed and at the same time he had an additional protective shield behind him. At least, it could block a lot of the stone slab attacks and he would not be seriously injured again. Mine collapse? It can't be. It was not until this moment that the 2 guards not far from the entrance of the mining area realized that the situation was not good, and both of them looked horrified. The two of them were so scared that their faces turned pale. They could only watch helplessly as the stream of rocks mixed with spiritual jade bombs came closer and closer. They knew that they would die if they continued to stay here, but their legs seemed to be filled with lead and didn't listen to them at all. Seeing that the two were about to be swallowed by the mine collapse, a figure suddenly hit them, and the three of them rolled into the mine tunnel, narrowly escaping the disaster. At the same time, the other mining areas were also rumbling. Although there was not a large-scale mine collapse like the number 10 mining area, there were also constant stones falling from the top of the mine, which was the precursor of a linked mine disaster. For a time, all the mining areas were panicking. In the face of a mine disaster, even the powerful cultivators might not be able to guarantee that they could escape unscathed. Although there were not many mine disasters in history, the number of people who died each time was not small. No one was willing to be the unlucky soul of a mine disaster. With a burst of panic and exclamations, everyone hurriedly fled. The entire Lingyu Hall was in a great panic. This day was destined to be recorded in the history books. Not only Lingyu Hall, but the entire three pavilions were alarmed. A mine disaster of a general degree was already very rare. As for a mine collapse of such a degree, it was even more rare to encounter in 1,000 years. It was impossible for the three pavilions not to be shocked. After the accident, the Elders' Council responded at the first time. They specifically sent an elder to Lingyu Hall and ordered Lingyu Hall to assist them in dealing with the aftermath. At the same time, the Law Enforcement Hall also immediately intervened to investigate the cause of the incident. Chapter 3955. Judging from the severity, it could be confirmed that this was a mine collapse that happened once in 1,000 years. However, because the initial mine collapse point was the number 10 dead mining area, only a few pieces of spiritual jade could be contributed in a year. Although the other mining areas were also affected, it was not a big problem. As long as the protection was reinforced, mining could be carried out as usual. Therefore, the loss of spiritual jade caused by the mine collapse could be said to be negligible. As for the casualties, the final statistics were also very small, only 1 dead and 13 injured. The one who died was naturally Meng Jueguang. In addition to Lin Yi and the 2 guards of the number 10 mining area, there were also 10 people injured in the other mining areas. Most of them were caused by fighting during the escape. But even so, this mine collapse was still taken seriously. After all, the one who died was Meng Jueguang. The appointment letter of the 3rd Pavilion Master of the Welcome Pavilion had already been drafted. Without a doubt, he had already entered the ranks of the top management of the Welcome Pavilion. He could be regarded as the martyr of the highest level in all the previous mine collapses of Spirit Jade Hall. At the level of Meng Jueguang, there was no need to mine personally. Even the number of times he went into the mine was not too many. He did not need to be in the front line. Naturally, he would not appear in the list of martyrs. Only this time, Meng Jueguang was the only exception. The death of Meng Jueguang immediately caused a sensation in all directions. Needless to say, the Welcome Pavilion. After the news came from the pavilion master Hu Yunfeng to the ordinary Blue Cloud Pavilion newcomers, everyone was shocked and in a mess. In the Welcome Pavilion, the death of Meng Jueguang was almost no less than a reshuffle of power. Both were in the position of the 3rd Pavilion Master. However, the death of Meng Jueguang and the departure of Lu Bianren were two completely different concepts. As the previous 3rd Pavilion Master, Lu Bianren's departure was not a big change to the welcoming pavilion. That was because Meng Jueguang had long since locked onto the position of the successor. This fat piece of meat that was in his mouth could not be taken away by anyone. Therefore, Lu Bianren's departure would not cause much chaos. However, Meng Jueguang was different. He was just about to take over. He didn't even get the letter of appointment from the 3rd Pavilion Master. His death was very sudden. It almost wiped out an unexpected blank space in the power hierarchy of the welcoming pavilion. Without a doubt, this was definitely a juicy piece of meat, but it was suddenly thrown in front of everyone when no one was mentally prepared. Chaos was inevitable when a group of dogs fought for food. Apart from that, the position left vacant by Meng Jueguang's death was not only that of the 3rd Pavilion Master of the welcoming pavilion, but also that of the eldest senior brother in charge of the newcomers of the Blue Cloud Pavilion. For a time, it could be said that the newcomers of Blue Cloud Pavilion were in a state of panic. Those with strength and skill would naturally want to take the opportunity to rise to the next level. Even if they could not extravagantly ask for the position of welcoming pavilion's 3rd Pavilion Master, they were still the eldest senior brother who managed the newcomers of Blue Cloud Pavilion. This position, which was not eye-catching but was extremely important, was also coveted by many. However, most of the newcomers of Blue Cloud Pavilion did not consider this problem. They did not have the strength to compete with others. The only thing they wanted to do now was to protect themselves. Originally, when Meng Jueguang was still alive, there was no problem for them to rely on him, even under Lin Yi's strong performance. Meng Jueguang's side was at a passive disadvantage, but it was not a big problem. After all, the arm could not twist the thigh. As long as Meng Jueguang took the position of the third pavilion master, everything would be fine. However, now that their backer, Meng Jueguang, had collapsed along with the mine collapse, what to do next was a big problem that concerned their future and even life and death. If they did not make a wise choice as soon as possible, it was hard to guarantee that Lin Yi would not make a move on them. When that time came, even if they were to hide like a tortoise, just simply ostracizing them would be enough to make them suffer. However, no matter what they thought in their hearts and what choice they made, they now had to depend on the mood of one person. This person was naturally Lin Yi. Previously, when Meng Jueguang was still alive, he had been pressured by Lin Yi to the point of retreating step by step. Now that Meng Jueguang was dead, Lin Yi's side was the dominant one. This had become an unavoidable reality. No matter what Clear Cloud Pavilion's new disciples wanted to do, they couldn't avoid Lin Yi, this big mountain. Therefore, they had to open their eyes and see clearly what Lin Yi's attitude was. Unfortunately, they could not come into contact with Lin Yi at all, because Lin Yi was currently being investigated by the Law Enforcement Hall. In the Law Enforcement Hall's interrogation room, Lin Yi looked at the Law Enforcement Hall expert in front of him and silently shook his head. The saying enemies are bound to meet on a narrow road was indeed true. The person in charge of the interrogation was surprisingly a familiar face, Ma Jian. Lin Yi could still clearly remember that although Ma Jian belonged to the Law Enforcement Hall, he was actually part of Su Lingchong's faction. In the previous newcomer assessment, he had secretly made a move against Lin Yi. Fortunately, Lin Yi's trump card was deep, so he could calmly deal with it. If it was any other newcomer, it was not impossible for them to die under this person's schemes. Strictly speaking, he did not know this Ma Jian, nor did he have any enmity with him in the past. There was no conflict between them. It was only because of his relationship with Su Lingchong that they walked on the opposite side. This time it was probably no exception. Name, identity, tell me truthfully. Ma Jian casually crossed his legs as he sized up Lin Yi with a glance and sneered. Just as Lin Yi had expected, he had indeed received Su Lingchong's instructions this time. Not only was he to make things difficult for Lin Yi, if possible, he was to push all the blame onto Lin Yi and seize the opportunity to get rid of him. Meng Jueguang's death was an enormous loss to Su Lingchong, this young master. Meng Jueguang's ability had already obtained Su Lingchong's acknowledgement and was gradually brought into his inner circle, so he would be of great use in the future. Otherwise, it would be utterly impossible for Su Lingchong to give a large amount of cultivation resources and various rare medicinal pills to Meng Jueguang, and it was even to the extent that he specially asked his grandfather, Su Yuanzheng, to stand out and fight for the position of third pavilion master of the Welcome Pavilion for him. In the future plans of this young master, Su Lingchong, Meng Jueguang was an existence that was similar to his right and left hand. Now that Meng Jueguang was dead, it was simply like cutting off an arm to him. Not only did it break his future wings, it caused all his previous investments to go down the drain at the same time. But the fortunate thing amidst the misfortune was that when the mine collapse occurred, Lin Yi and Meng Jueguang were at the same place. Moreover, they were at the starting point of the mine collapse. No matter what the exact inside story was, this gave Su Lingchong the opportunity to make a big fuss. Chapter 3956. Lin Yi looked at him and said lightly, Lin Yi, a newcomer to Blue Cloud Pavilion, where were you when the mine collapsed? Ma Jian continued to ask with a cold face. My number 10. Lin Yi answered. Very good. Then at the time of the incident, were you with Meng Jueguang? Ma Jian asked with a deeper meaning. That's right. Lin Yi nodded immediately. This was something that the two guards had seen, so there was no way to hide it. In fact, there was really nothing to hide. It's good that you admit it. Ma Jian smiled darkly and then asked, do you have any explanation for the sudden collapse of the mine? As far as I know, my number 10 happened to be the source of the mine collapse, which means that the people closest to the mine collapse were only you and Meng Jueguang. Lin Yi shook his head lightly and replied, I'm sorry, I'm not a professional. I have no clue as to why the mine collapse happened. It's useless no matter how close I was at the time. No clue? Ma Jian glanced at Lin Yi mockingly and said with certainty, then I'll reluctantly tell you. According to the professionals of Spirit Jade Hall, the direct cause of the mind collapse was the explosion of spiritual energy. However, with the density and activity of spiritual energy in mind number 10, not to mention an explosion, even the lowest level of protection array would not be able to destroy it. The only explanation for this abnormality is that someone tampered with it, which ultimately led to the explosion of spiritual energy. Linny didn't say anything, but he couldn't help but feel a slight fluctuation in his heart. Although he didn't know whether it was true or not, at least Ma Jian's words sounded quite reasonable. If this was really the case, the plan to use the mind collapse to bury Meng Jueguang seemed to be a great success, but it couldn't be said to be perfect. At least there was a trace of flaw. It seems like I've hit the nail on the head, right? Ma Jian's eyes lit up and he immediately smiled proudly. Then he changed the topic again. You and Meng Jueguang don't get along. This is no secret in the Welcome Pavilion, and at the time of the incident the two of you happened to be together. Moreover, it was in the deserted 10th mining area. This really makes me very curious. Tell me, what were you two doing at that time? Mining? Linny replied without batting an eyelid. Mining? Ma Jian was stunned for a moment, and then the corners of his mouth couldn't help but curve into a mocking smile. Linny, I seem to have forgotten to tell you in advance that joking is a taboo in our law enforcement hall, especially for a suspect like you. You will die very miserably. Mining in the mining area was the most standard answer, but it also depended on who it was. A person of Meng Jueguang's level actually went to the mining area personally, and he even did it in the godforsaken 10th mining area. If this wasn't a joke, then what was? Sir, you seem to have misunderstood something. I was indeed mining at that time, but I didn't say that it also included Meng Jueguang. Linny said lightly. Then what was Meng Jueguang doing at that time? Don't tell me that you two were having a friendly conversation, or that he was cheering you on. Ma Jian said with a mocking expression. Linny looked at him, and his expression was as calm as an ancient well. He said, he was threatening me, saying that he was going to be promoted to the 3rd pavilion master of the Welcome Pavilion, so he wanted to force me to be his subordinate. Otherwise, he would remove senior brother Ku and replace him with Murong Zhen and Meng Tong as the new managers of the Blue Cloud Pavilion, so that we would never be able to make a name for ourselves. If that's the case, then the atmosphere at that time wasn't very good. Any normal person wouldn't swallow such a threat, let alone you, the famous number 1 newcomer of the Welcome Pavilion. I heard that Meng Jueguang couldn't suppress you before, so it's obvious that he wouldn't be able to subdue you with just a few words this time. Am I right? Ma Jian smiled evilly without a trace. What are you trying to say? Linny narrowed his eyes. At this point, Ma Jian should finally reveal his true intentions. As expected, Ma Jian immediately said with evil intentions, can I speculate that because Meng Jueguang forced you, you held a grudge against him, or perhaps you wanted to eliminate the threat, so you secretly destroyed the 10th mining area's protective formation, causing a spiritual energy explosion, and used the collapse of the mine to kill Meng Jueguang? Bah, bah, bah. Hearing this, Linny smiled faintly and clapped a few times. Then he said unhurriedly, your imagination is not bad, but to blame a mine collapse that only happens once in 1,000 years on a newcomer of my district, isn't this speculation a little too bold? Moreover, I remember that the law enforcement hall only looks at evidence. If you can't produce any evidence, then can I take your words as slander and report it to the higher-ups of the law enforcement hall? You want evidence? Ma Jian suddenly smiled sinisterly, then I'll give you evidence. Although there weren't many people in the 10th mining area, you probably forgot one thing. At that time, besides you and Meng Jueguang, there were 2 other guards in the mining area who witnessed everything. They personally confessed that before the mine collapse, you were wandering around the 10th mining area abnormally and didn't mine properly at all. Needless to say, this was your preparation to cause the mine collapse. Isn't this evidence enough? Linny immediately became silent. Although everything that Ma Jian said and speculated was undoubtedly because he was instructed by Su Lingchong to mess with him, it was precisely because of this that he accidentally locked onto the murderer in advance. No matter how far-fetched such speculations and so-called evidence seemed to be, in the end, it could almost be equivalent to the truth. Until now, Ma Jian himself still didn't realize that his racking his brains to frame Lin Yi was actually the truth. A deeply hidden killing intent flashed across Lin Yi's eyes. He suddenly raised his head and looked straight at Ma Jian. I'll say it again, your imagination is really rich. Unfortunately, it's too rich. The reason why I wandered around was purely because Meng Jueguang had been bothering me. He didn't want me to mine properly and kept tormenting me. I had no choice but to endure it. You still want to quibble when a disaster is imminent? You're simply daydreaming. Do you think I'll believe you? Ma Jian sneered. Lin Yi looked at him with a faint smile and said indifferently, "It doesn't matter whether you believe me or not. I'm just a newbie. I casually wandered around the 10th mining area and caused a mine collapse. I even used it to kill Meng Jueguang. Why don't you guess what other people would think of such a ridiculous logic?" Chapter 3957. What a joke. Since when does our law enforcement hall need to look at other people's expressions? Aren't you looking down on our law enforcement hall too much? Or are you looking down on our hall master? Ma Jian spoke in an aloof and disdainful tone. In the past, the law enforcement hall still had rules to follow. But after Ram Jie took office, under his leadership, the people under him could be said to be unscrupulous. In order to achieve their goals, they could do anything. They were recognized by the three great pavilions as the most tyrannical and overbearing in the history of the law enforcement hall, but at the same time, they were also the most capable generation. Most of the time, even the Elders Guild could not criticize Ram Jie and his subordinates. As for the public opinion of the outside world, they were completely disregarded. Just think about it, even the death of the Soaring Sky Pavilion supervising Deacon Nan Tianyong, who was on the same side, could be ignored to the point of not asking about it, just because Hallmaster Gong Yangjie was not interested in it. In this case, only Meng Jueguang had died, so naturally, it was not enough to enter Gong Yangjie's eyes. According to the current rules of the Law Enforcement Hall, as long as Hallmaster Gong Yangjie didn't interfere in the middle of a case, then his subordinates had absolute authority over the case. They didn't need to care about what the outside world or the higher-ups of the three great pavilions thought. This was because Gong Yangjie would bear all the pressure for them without any worries. This was where Ma Jian's confidence came from. Ram Jie definitely had no interest in this kind of small case. Under his protection, as long as he made up a reasonable excuse, Ma Jian could do whatever he wanted. Therefore, the matter of Su Lingchong asking him to get rid of Lin Yi was simply a piece of cake in his eyes. This was completely out of Lin Yi's expectation. He was caught unprepared. In a place like the Law Enforcement Hall, and in the hands of Ma Jian, this time it was really a bit difficult. Ma Jian's strength was not considered strong. Lin Yi was confident that he could deal with him. However, if he dared to make a move in the Law Enforcement Hall's territory, then needless to say, he would definitely die. Even if he had 10 lives, it wouldn't be enough for him to die unless Shengguan Laner intervened forcefully. Of course, this was a last resort, and Lin Yi believed that it was impossible for Shanghai Laner to turn a blind eye to it. It was just that this last resort was equivalent to admitting that the mine collapse was caused by him. "What do you want?" Lin Yi asked in a deep voice. This was the only way to deal with this situation. He could only take it one step at a time. "What do I want?" Ma Jian laughed and said proudly, "Of course I don't want to do anything. I'm a law enforcer, and you're the murderer who caused the mine collapse and killed Meng Jueguang. I'm just doing my job. I'm going to send you to the guillotine." Ma Jian originally thought that after he finished speaking, Lin Yi would definitely panic like a normal person. Unexpectedly, Lin Yi did not panic at all. Instead, he calmly raised his eyebrows and said, "Speaking of which, does your hall master, Ram Jie, know that you're acting so recklessly and covering the sky with one hand?" No matter how Ram Jie controlled his subordinates, no matter how he shielded his own people. But at least one thing was certain. No one in power would want a subordinate who acted recklessly. They only needed an obedient and capable watchdog. They wouldn't need a wastrel who acted on his own. This was the iron law. No matter how monolithic the law enforcement hall was, it must have its own internal rules. Even if Ram Jie didn't intervene personally. But this kind of case was absolutely impossible for Ma Jian to cover the sky with one hand. Otherwise, the law enforcement hall would have long been rotten. How could it have the power and influence it had today? "Hey kid, is your brain broken? Or do you really think that you're a big shot after being called the #1 newcomer in the welcoming pavilion? Let me tell you, trash like you can't even be considered as a green onion. You can't even enter the eyes of our hall master Ram. So you better give up on this thought as soon as possible. I dare to guarantee that even if I send you to the guillotine, hall master Ram will absolutely not spare you a glance." Ma Jian laughed without the slightest scruple. However, before he finished laughing, the secret door of the interrogation room suddenly opened. A person came in and said a few words in his ear. Ma Jian's face suddenly changed. "Those two ants, do they really dare to say that? Did they turn a deaf ear to what I said to them before? Ma Jian clenched his teeth and clenched his fist. So that's how it is. Lin Yi's heart was relieved. Although the other person's voice was very low, with his extraordinary perception, he could more or less hear the general situation. The matter that the person told Ma Jian was about the confession of the 2 guards in the number 10 mining area. These 2 people were closest to the starting point of the mine collapse. They were summoned to be investigated like Lin Yi. Of course, the 2 of them were different from Lin Yi. Lin Yi was identified as a murderer by Ma Jian, and they were used as witnesses to convict Lin Yi. As early as the first time he took over the case, Ma Jian had already hinted to the 2 of them. What they should say and what they shouldn't say had already been recorded. In fact, in Ma Jian's plan, these 2 people didn't even need to deliberately make false testimonies like witnessing Lin Yi kill someone. They only needed to slightly embellish the situation of that day and tilt things in the direction of Lin Yi. As long as there was a reasonable logic, coupled with the confession of these 2 so-called witnesses, Ma Jian could firmly pin the crime on Lin Yi's head. If everything went well, it would not be difficult to send him to the guillotine. Originally, everything was under Ma Jian's control. However, what he didn't expect was that it was precisely the 2 guards that he had the most confidence in, who were not worth mentioning, that both of them had now betrayed him. Not only did the 2 guards not follow his instructions to make the confession against Lin Yi, but they also opened their mouths to exonerate Lin Yi. After Meng Jueguang came to mining area number 10, I don't know if it was for testing something or for some other reason. Anyway, he forced Lin Yi to dig everywhere. As a result, the mine collapsed. It's hard to say if there is a direct connection between the 2, but even if there is a connection, the root cause is Meng Jueguang. He deserved to die in the mine collapse, and it has nothing to do with Lin Yi. These were the original words of the 2 guards. Although there were slight discrepancies between their words, the meaning was exactly the same. Hearing this, Lin Yi couldn't help but secretly rejoice in his heart. Fortunately, he saved the 2 guards when the mine collapse happened. Fortunately, these 2 were not people who would bite the hand that fed them. Otherwise, if they really gave false testimonies, he wouldn't be able to reason with them. Damn it, wouldn't it be a waste of effort? Chapter 3958. Before any case came to a conclusion, there must be evidence, no matter how far-fetched the evidence was, but there must be. This was the iron law that Ram Jia personally set down. From top to bottom in the law enforcement hall, no matter who it was, absolutely did not dare to go against it in the slightest. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. As long as the 2 guards did not testify against Lin Yi, Ma Jian would not have any evidence in his hands. Then he would be unable to complete Su Lingqiong's instructions and would not be able to touch a single hair on Lin Yi. Lord Law Enforcement Envoy, if there's nothing else, can I leave? Lin Yi patted his butt and stood up with a carefree expression. Wait, when did this Law Enforcement Envoy say that you can leave? Or do you think that the Law Enforcement Hall is a place that you can come and go as you please? Ma Jian said with an unfriendly expression. When Lin Yi heard this, he glanced at him and said with a smile that was not a smile, then what do you want? If I didn't hear wrongly earlier, you don't have the so-called evidence in your hands at all. Just for the sake of helping Su Lingqiong settle a personal grudge, you're disregarding the Law Enforcement Hall's rules. Are you sure that doing this is appropriate? Ma Jian was startled when he heard this, then he could not help but fly into a rage out of humiliation, and his face was extremely gloomy. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.